All right, so I'm going to start this video like I'm going to end it with Corey J. Feldman. So this video was going to be under 2 hours. It was going to feature the debacle of the Olympics. I already made a video, but I put in a video, but I think most people didn't see it. It was the Kamala Harris video, but I already covered the Olympic opening ceremony in that video. But I think people didn't know because I put it at the end of the video, and I put it at the end of the title of the video. But I'm revisiting it here as the last Olympics, and that it's self-explanatory as I go through this video. And I was going to cover Joe Biden's. They're still rolling him out, and that's great. And there's another video clip that came up today that I didn't put in this video, but that's coming. And then Trump had this sort of interesting, sort of, I don't call it a meltdown, but he went full Trump at the national gathering of black reporters, black news media people. And that's wonderful. And Kamala Harris, something very telling has happened with her candidacy. So that all happened after I was almost done with this video. So that's why it's like 2 videos in one. So I'm going to put this up for like basically 2 or 3 days, so people can get the whole. I mean, it's just a lot of good information. It's one of the better videos I've made in terms of all this stuff. A lot of big things in this video. So without further ado, there's a second introduction here and then the rest of it. Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. So a lot of weird events happened that I feel like are connected. And this is clearly the year of the amateur, because it's amateur hour out there for everybody, but particularly Kamala and Fishboy Trumps. And so today is August 1st, Thursday, August 1st. I was going to finish this video yesterday, like I had, what was going to be the video. And at the end of the video, there's a guy, Dr. Cruz or Dr. Curse or something like this. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. Somebody sent me a little clip from him that was on Instagram. There's also a little Corey Feldman thing. And, I had all this stuff together. The video was like, I want my videos to have sort of like a general theme or point, right? But something happened where I listened to this audio. It was about the mind control aspect of blue light. And this guy, you'll see the clip in a bit. And, I've been aware of the blue light aspect. And, my eyes have switched from my glasses recently, and I was like having trouble with the computer, and it's a whole thing. I'm not going to get into that. But, I turned the blue light down on my computer, my phone, and our TV because, something I'd done before and was aware of just because of this thing. And my wife and I have been talking about getting some sort of grounding, like either, grounding, they have this stuff that's, it's a Faraday cage you can put around this cloth you can put around your bed to block the signal when you're sleeping at night. All the new Wi-Fi and all that stuff. And when I turned the blue light down, I breathed a sigh of relief. Like I felt good about it. Like was immediate. Usually we would do something like that, you don't notice. Like sometimes I do something I notice and sometimes I don't. But when I did it, I was like, oh, this is I felt a good thing. Like I knew it was a good thing. And I had ordered this grounding sheet. It was like $100. It goes on the, underneath there's like a fitted sheet. And you plug it into the ground part of the outlet and, I'd looked into these things before and it just did come up. And I was putting it on my bed and, I haven't had any back issues. Like I've had some lower back stuff once in a while. And, I have these things now that I'm older. Like I have a pain somewhere, but it just moves around. And my shoulder had gotten better, and then my neck felt bad. Like I had a shoulder thing that I woke up one day and it hurt. Like I heard it sleeping. So like it's just, and we got these pull-up bar things from that, which is good. They rest up on the door frame. And my wife and I have been stretching. My son's been doing pull-ups on it. Kind of a neat setup we found on Amazon. It's really helped me, the stretching. So like it's the pain in my shoulder actually led to something that we've all benefited from. having the pull-up bar, and just like stretching, whatever it is. And so, but I made the bed and I twisted, and something popped in my lower back, and I couldn't move. And this happened maybe like 4 or 5 times in the past year or so. And I have all these stretches I do for my lower back. And I've been doing the squatting exercise, and probably since I started doing that, my lower back has not had any problems at all. Like I do this, thing I've told you guys about. But anyways, so that happened. And I'm like, well, I've taken some of the Olympics. I'm not going to finish editing my video because I couldn't move. And I just sat down and started watching the Olympics. But I think I turned on the news first. And Trump had just given this talk. Let me see if I can find the group he was talking to. So I'm going to put it out today. He goes, Black Journalist Convention. So there's a convention of black journalists, which I don't know. I don't understand that at all either. But, just in general, they have all these conventions of demographics, right? And Trump, for no campaign planning, complete amateur hour, decides to go on this talk with these people who are clearly not going to like him. These are people who think that Trump is a racist, right? And Trump decides to go on there, into their convention. And they don't applaud for him. He comes out, and they're clearly hating on the guy. And the woman asks sort of an aggressive question, but a fair question for, her belief system, that Trump should have known was coming. And he gets pissed off. And then I get a tweet from, a recommended tweet saying, Trump just put this woman in her place. And I'm like, you don't understand, why are the Trumpers? Because I had watched the thing, right? And CNN then shows the part where he talks about Kamala and her racial and, ethnic backgrounds in a way to say she's not black. And he does it in such a bizarre way. And then the CNN person goes, well, that went south, right? Then this is what I was like, this thing already went south, like the first question, right? And I'm going to show you all this. So, but I was talking about Kamala's ethnic heritage. I remembered some things, and it was funny that I was doing that when Trump brought it up. But I did it in a smart, competent way, and Trump did it in an incompetent, amateur hour way. But then Kamala's rallies, she's doing something at her rallies, which to me indicates she has no chance of winning. And it's complete amateur hour over there. And both of these people are trying to give the election away. And so you're going to see this evolve throughout the video, because in the first 2 hours of the video, I had no idea this was going to happen. And I'm just covering things, and it's building towards an event I had no idea was going to happen. So this is going to be a great video in that sense, because it's significant. It was a significant day yesterday. And then I turned on something that happened on MSNBC that was great and hilarious. And this kid the white kid was at one of these rallies for Kamala. And just the whole thing is going to blend together, I hope, into a, just a masterpiece of it, whatever. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to getting the rest of this done. I have to edit some, and then I have to do the Kamala stuff with the Trump stuff and the Kamala stuff. But, it's already got 1 million views on CNN. And, they don't break into their news coverage to show Trump giving a speech at one of his rallies, unless something goes south. And so all these outlets now have this whole conversation between Trump and these journalists. CNN has it, MSNBC has it. I'm getting all these recommendations because I watched I had one of them up to watch. But Fox was covering it live. Fox had it. And it's a horrible decision by Trump. So let's get into the rest of the stuff, because it's going to progress into this thing. But this is clearly amateur hour. This is the year of the amateur. Like I said this early on, and I always forget these things. But this is so bad. Both campaigns suck. It's a disaster. And, it was going to start with Joe Biden. and it does start with Joe Biden doing his like Joe Biden thing, which they're not hiding the guy, which is wonderful. Like, and he's deteriorating faster than I thought he would. So all these things are coming together. I mean, in an apocalyptic way. All right, so let's get into it here. Before that, one more thing. My back is fine. Like I do a stretches, and it locked up for a little bit, and it's probably 80%, and I think it's going to recover faster because I've been doing that exercise. My back is stronger, and whatever. Like whatever, I don't know. It doesn't matter, but you don't need to say anything. It's just the point is that this thing happened, like it was a part of this whole thing. Also to do with the, that they're trying to get us all the time, like through the, the screens with the blue light, which you'll hear this guy, which I, may or may not be true, but I believe it is, and through the Wi-Fi and through everything else, and and the food and everything we're being, it's a constant battle, and of course I'm getting older. But anyways, you don't need to say anything. is my point. There's no reason to say, hope you feel better. Like this doesn't, that's not the why. When I bring something like that up, it's just I'm talking about what's going on with me, which is, always intertwined with what's happening in the videos. So anyways, let's get into it here. Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. This is going to be a really fun video for me, at least, maybe for you. Biden gave an address last night, and it is just a new revelation, a new possibility of something great might be going on, and I'll get to that second. And then I just want to go back through the Olympics and talk a little bit about that whole debacle. And this one, image of the drag queens at the Last Supper and how that's drawing the attention of the of all this stuff, right? The Christians, and but there's so much there more to talk about. And first, I just I need to say that the shadow banning thing and YouTube now recommending my videos more and people coming back to my channel, and to keep the momentum going. I mean, it still needs to grow more. And I still need like more views. And right now, there's a lot of people are coming to my channel because of what's going on in the world. Everything's got intense. And so all of that stuff, right? And so the way to do that is subscribe, resubscribe, hit the notification buttons, the regular one and the bell, and then, watch the videos or leave comments and share the videos, whatever you do, right? Join the membership program, do something, like the videos, do something to let YouTube know that you want to continue seeing my content, because otherwise it'll disappear again. And, get the word out best you can. I mean, whatever has to happen. I think my channel is built for this specific time more than ever. And so with that being said, before I get into the Olympics, the part of the thing with Biden, I'm going to talk about this address. Now, I was thinking about this. Remember when George Clooney said that Biden was basically mentally incompetent after a fundraiser he had with him? That the Biden you saw in the debate was the same Biden they saw in the fundraiser, and that he wasn't up for the task. He talked about how much he loved him. And that was a big story for like 3 or 4 days. And so that was on July 10th. Today is Tuesday, July 30th. So that was 20 days ago, not even 3 weeks ago. It's not even been 3 weeks since the George Clooney thing. And the debate was on the 27th of June, 33 days ago. Of course, that's a big number in Freemasonry, but 33 days ago. That's a little over a month. And I've been talking about this for the past 2 or 3 years. And it just keeps on getting this phenomenon where so much is packed in on a daily basis, right? And so since that time of the George Clooney letter, Trump had the fake, thing that happened with his ear getting shot and all that BS that we've seen. And then he had his convention with the WWF or whatever. I stopped talking about Biden because now Trump's fake shooting and all the BS that went with it. So that all happened, right? And then there was Biden withdrawing and then Kamala Harris emerging as a candidate and all the things that happened with that. And then, of course, during that time, we had this Olympic ceremony, which was one of the most Illuminati, blood sacrifice, apocalyptic, four horsemen of the apocalypse, pale horse rider, people are also talking about from biblical terms, and all these things. I mean, this is all the things that are packed in there, right? And there'll be more. Like, this is just how it is now. That things don't stick, stories don't stick. And, I said this years and years ago when Bill Clinton got caught lying and cheating on his wife with a 21-year-old intern, and all the icky details came out from it, And that thing went on for like 2 years. That was like a 2-year story. But Bill Clinton realized you just don't quit, right? Some people get embarrassed. Some people get ashamed. I mean, look at the difference between the people who got Me Too'd. Like Louis C.K. admitted that he did the things that women accused him of, tossing off in front of him, right? And he admitted to it, and he got canceled, where Woody Allen, who, was associated with Jeffrey Epstein, married his 18-year-old stepdaughter, and whatever creepy, adoptive daughter, whatever that was, that stuff. And, clearly he had a film in which his character was making out with a 15-year-old Mariel Hemingway. She was 15. She played an 18-year-old girl, but she was 15. And it turned out a woman came forward and said that really happened in real life. She was a teenage high school girl that dated Woody Allen when he was in his 40s. That's just an example. That's just Woody Allen. Like all the people who... Another example is Jimmy Kimmel's, who was on the... now he's a feminist and a liberal, but he was... The Man Show was one of the most misogynistic shows ever on, like, network TV. They hated women. I don't know if it's cable, maybe it was cable, but either way. And he was despicable to women in a not funny way. But he also did blackface in a very mocking way. He dressed up as Oprah Winfrey and Karl Malone. And, he sucks as a comedian. And he had all these other things that he did. And he got, the stuff started to come out on him the same time Ellen was getting canceled, right? And Ellen stuck around, but he went on vacation for 3 months, came back, everyone forgot about him getting canceled, right? He's a gatekeeper as she is. Ellen's a gatekeeper, they both are. And so we've seen this with Donald Trump. Like Donald Trump just wouldn't admit to getting caught on things, criminal things. And that's the new norm, right? If you just wait it out, people move on to something else. And now even more so. Stories just don't stick, right? And so Kamala Harris should be done because it's now revealed that Joe Biden had Parkinson's. At least he has some form of dementia, which everybody can see. He's not mentally up to the job. And yet, and she, was telling everybody he was. And still, like that's not even a news story, right? Because it doesn't even matter. Nothing matters, right? You're not held accountable even though you are and you aren't. You are for a couple of days and they move on to something else. And so the thing with the Olympics, it'll disappear. And there's just so much going on in the rest of the world. But it's very significant in a lot of ways. So my wife and I were watching something, and like she ended up taking a night. We both fall asleep at different times. And so I turned on the Olympics, and I'm taping the Olympics. I haven't watched the Olympics in a couple of times. Like I just can't get into this stuff. But I used to watch it with my family when I was a kid. I went to the Olympics in Montreal with my dad when Caitlyn Jenner was Bruce Jenner, and he was a decathlete. That was years and years ago, right? And so we lived in Connecticut. We drove up to Montreal, whatever. And so the Olympics was always like a big deal to me. And, it happened during the summer, around my birthday. I'm a summer person. And I just, I was into some of the sports. Like I wanted to be a high jumper. Of course, I played basketball. And when I was a little kid, my mom went on vacation. And she went to visit her mom, my grandmother, who was sick or something. And my dad was left, as the sole incompetent parent to me. My dad really couldn't cook, so I don't know what we did. Maybe we went to McDonald's every night. I don't even know. But I was just a kid on my own. Like, I don't remember that time other than the thing that I remember about it is, I was like between 7 and 10 years old. And there was an extra bedroom. My sisters had moved out. And there was a semi-new mattress and bed spring. And I brought it outside, put it on in our backyard. It was raining, and the thing was wrecked. And I set up a high jump thing, and I was practicing high jumping. I built a high jump, where I would run up and land on the mattress, right? And my mom came home, and she was very mad at my dad. And so, I've always had this thing with the Olympics. And I started to, I taped the Olympics. And I'm like, it's just so much. I don't want to go into this, There's so many events and things I don't care about, sports I don't care about. But I started watching some of the things. And I said to my wife last night, because I feel like it's probably the last Olympics. And so I'm just, I just want to watch it. I just want to, participate a little bit in it. And it really hit her because she was like, wow, that's saying quite, something, that there won't be another one. This will be it, right? This could be the last presidential election. I mean, all these things, right? I mean, that's very believable. I would never have believed that statement before this time. Maybe the last Olympics with the COVID. But, with all the things that have happened and all the things that are predicted in the whispers of the brighter world and these things, the Olympics is, the degradation that's just everywhere. And so let's start off with these clips. I have a few clips I'm going to show you here. And then we'll get into the, all the rest of it, right? The opening ceremony and all the controversy. Okay, so let's start with the funny one first and then the not so funny one.
Pass by Shoji, and that ball blocked, and Losair, one of the best in the business, albeit undersized, will get the job done.
Losair was there and making a really nice read.
So I watched a little bit of the Americans against Venezuela here, and you can see the guy looks like that actor. I think his name is Jay Burchell, something like that. He's a part of that whole sort of comedic actor groups that are, freaks and geeks nerds. But his name is Loser Bruno. They said it's Losair, but it's Loser, right? To the rest of us. But then Dwayne Wade was announcing the basketball games, right? Dwayne Wade sucks as an announcer. He sucks as a person. I mean, he's real annoying and pretentious. He's just not good at doing this job. But they hired him at NBC for whatever reason. He's married to a famous actress model, and one of their kids is trans, and that's important to know because of what he's about to say here. One of the sayings in the NBA is, I am him. It's like saying I am the man, like I am him. I'm the chosen one or whatever it is, right? A basketball god. And so Dwayne Wade then makes this a pronoun joke, right? Let me show you these two clips here. In one, he's talking about Kevin Durant, and one, he's talking about LeBron James. There was do a play on words. All these announcers have these taglines, right? Boom goes the dynamite, remember? Like those kind of things, right? In fuego, these different things that they say as, players playing well. And Dwayne Wade did a play on words saying his pronouns are he, him, meaning he, him. That's not proper English, but he's saying he, him. He is him, right? He is the GOAT. But he said it about both LeBron James and Kevin Durant, which is weird. But of course, we know what pronouns are in this whole thing, right? And he's bringing it into this basketball game. And that just, it's annoying, and it just speaks to who he is and the whole thing. There was another game, the volleyball game that I was watching. I think it was the same game. And there was a volleyball player, and I should have taped it, like I wasn't thinking about it at the time. But the guy said the guy was playing well. And he says, he has really good statistics. He's, he averages 6-something, and 6-something. He goes, so the announcer goes, it's 666, the evil kind, which I thought was, bizarre. So this is, I've watched a limited amount of the Olympics, fast forwarding, watching little bits and pieces of things, taping it. And these are one of the things that I'm seeing and hearing, right? So it isn't just the opening ceremony. So the big controversy in America is to do with Christians. But there are so many things that are offensive. I'll go through the whole thing in a second, the various images, and explain them as we go through them, right? And then I'll talk about this thing as an overall understanding. But to start off with, there is these drag queens in the Last Supper. And I've seen so many people addressing this on the internet. There's a video that came up from Stephen A. Smith and all these other people, right? And so what the official story is that this is Dionysus or Dionysus or something. Well, I don't even know who that is. It's some Greek god or whatever. And the image depicted here is from him and not from the Last Supper, right? The problem with that is that France used to be a Catholic and then Christian country, right? There was still Christianity there in all of Europe and America and then, globally. And, Italy's right there with the Catholic Church, and the actual painting isn't that far away from France, right? This is Michelangelo's The Last Supper. And so they know it looked like that, right? They know that most people are going to think it's the Last Supper. No one knows who the fuck Dionysus is, right? And so, how many Greek people are there? And I bet the Greek people even thought it was the Last Supper. And so they know what people were going to think about it, right? So that's the first problem with their argument, because whatever they say it is, just like them saying that the pale horse, the apocalyptic rider, the horseman of the apocalypse that they use at the end, and then presenting a flag to the or the flame or whatever it was, flag or flame, whatever that, I can't remember what it was, right in front of the Baal, Baal statue of the the bull. Like that's what they were doing, and that's what it looked like, and that's they can say whatever they want, like they can have plausible deniability, but they don't have that because they all know how it was going to seem. But then there's the whole rest of it, because like I said in my original video, that there are all these Muslim countries and like countries like India that are still very religiously based, and they aren't all aboard this idea of the whole gender stuff and all the stuff that they're rolling out in the liberal European countries in America. And there's kids involved, and people's kids are watching, and this is going out globally. And there's no respect for people's beliefs globally, right? They're just going to force this on you because there's so much to do with the gay culture. I would say about half of their performance had something to do with gay culture, and then the other half was Illuminati stuff, satanic things, right? They have Marie Antoinette there, and well, let me just go through these images, and then we'll, just to say what they say they were, and just look at the images, right? Like, let's take a look at those things first here. Okay, so we're going to come back to this Horseman of the Apocalypse, but that was one of, to me, the biggest. People are calling it the Pale Rider from the Bible. Of course, there was a Clint Eastwood movie called The Pale Rider, I think, as well. But this was this original creature that was, these kids got into the boat with it, right? And, it was like the Grim Reaper. They brought the Olympic flame, and it was, the don't pay the ferryman to get to the other side, the ferryman that takes you across the river Styx, right? And then there's Lady Gaga, who was, Lady Gaga, and she did a very flamboyant performance. She's looking very much like a dude there. And so, like, this is the stuff that they're bringing in, dark stuff. Those kids went through the catacombs. There's the figure again. In the beginning, they went through the catacombs. There were a bunch of skull imagery, scary place. And it might mean something to France, but they got to realize that this is going out globally, like I said, right? And so it's all darkness and, death and Illuminati stuff. There's a dude dancing in a dress. There's lots of other, sort of flamboyant dancers. On the other side of this, they're singing. They're some kind of performance from Les Miserables, Les Mis, whatever, right? This miserable thing. And so, yeah, that's Marie Antoinette, and I guess that means something to them in their democracy, but they beheaded a person here. They're celebrating the death of this woman. And the red, all the symbolism, the colors, Illuminati, blood sacrifice stuff. She's holding her own head. Kids are watching this. Like, what are they seeing here, right? There she is holding her own head. And then they go from Les Mis to playing heavy metal music. And then they have, this guy's playing heavy metal music. And they have a variety of bloody, fire-based destructive stuff coming with the next image here. We're just waiting on that. And so here it is. Here's the image. So they have this Marie Antoinette in every window here across this, where the ship is passing by. They have an opera singer. They have this guy screaming heavy metal crap. It's hard to listen to. It's offensive to people, right? Even in France, but globally. Like, they're just saying a big fuck you to you and your beliefs, right? To all these conservative places. And they have blood and fire coming out of the windows. It's supposed to represent the French Revolution, which, it isn't like the place is great now. I mean, I'm not a fan of royalty, but, beheading the woman and celebrating her being beheaded and then all the other things with that, right? And, kids don't know what this is, right? Like, you got little kids watching this. Like, Olympics is more for kids than anybody else. And they're just taking a big giant dump on other people's beliefs and other people's values and the rest of it, right? There's a number of images here, and it goes through this like blood streaming from the windows and then the explosions and just all the rest of it, right? And so there's the fire there. Fire is always associated with this kind of ritualistic stuff, and so it's definitely not like traditional, nice. These are artsy and aggressive, and then there's these gay dudes that are in a library. And again, there's people who, their culture and what they believe is different than what liberals and people across the liberal world and America, that this, the pronoun stuff and all the rest of it. Like, they don't believe in this, right? They're not on board with this. Even lots of people in Europe and lots of people in America. And so you're just saying, well, we're going to force this on you. Again, if you're doing it based on the amount of population, and then there's these two dudes here that they're just kissing, so they feature a gay kiss. And to these other countries, it's like, you're not respecting what we believe, right? It's not just rude, but it's, it's myopic, it's narcissistic. You're pushing something on people that don't believe it, and the reaction isn't going to be positive. In fact, they had to take the video off the internet. I mean, at least on YouTube in America, because there was so much pushback to the Dionysus thing, right? And so this is what looks to be like a trans woman from, I forget, she was from some French island, and she's a singer, not a great singer. And she's a giant compared to the dancers. She's like a whole head taller than the other people there. And then they featured Despicable Me, which, I showed a bunch of pictures from when they did this thing I believe is called the Iron Maiden, which is it has an owl. They have a big owl in the Bohemian Grove. The head on top of this thing is an owl, and the Despicable Me and Illumination Productions, which is like another way of saying Illuminati, is based in France. I didn't know it. It has like pyramids in the first movie and a bunch of symbolism. But the kid goes into this torture device. You see the owl head on top of it. He's got a crocodile. And, they're really pushing this, these minions who have the, one eye, many of them. They're a big part of this thing. It was like a 5-minute segment. And this is part of that movie where the minions are this guy Gru, G-R-U, and he's got a sort of a Russian accent. And his, Gru is the CIA of Russia, right? And so, like, this is like a blood sacrifice that they've just done. They didn't show this at the Olympics, but I'm showing you what the Illumination Studios has done. I didn't know it's based in France because, they can make movies like that and then just dub in English, American voices. And so it sounds like it's, it feels like it's an American-made movie, but this is a French-made movie, and that reveals that it's just a juice box and that she herself didn't get pierced. But, the whole idea of the thing, right? And it's just very dark, very adult-oriented, and it just shows they have real disrespect. There's the head of the owl on top of it. And so, this is just a big part of the whole, the Olympic debacle, right? And it's how it affects people who don't agree with your beliefs. And there's no light, there's no family, right? Where was the family part? I mean, not just family friendly, but where were the families? Like some sort of traditional, there's no, reference to Jesus or, it is a Christian country. There's no reference to religion. And I'm going to cover the other side of that as well. I'm going to talk about how these people feel about religion. But there's still a lot of Christians and Catholics in France, and they have a lot of Muslims. They have a great deal of a Muslim population, and those people aren't into this, this modern day woke belief system, these things. So, I mean, it's disrespectful to all those people. You're forcing your beliefs on them and doing it over and over again. The whole thing was gross, like the whole, all of it. There was nothing there that was redeeming or anything that was, traditional or any of these other things. So there's the president of France and his dude, and there's a dude singing some opera. Both these things, president of France and his dude, and they're listening to some opera. And the thing was just weird. Like it was very bizarre thing, right? All of it. So this guy sang in a very high falsetto, girl-like voice and was doing weird mime-like gestures. I mean, it's just like, it was just one thing after another. So we talked about the drag queen stuff in the Last Supper, and like, this is again the thing that's being focused, but it's just a small part of it. This was a little sideshow that they had on a bridge. Like this was stuff was going on a bridge, and a lot of it was weird fashion stuff. And I guess there's a guy who exposed his testicles and part of it. Like I don't have all of it here. I just scanned through it and I just pulled some of the photos. I scanned through what I captured on my phone, and then I I just fast forwarded. It was so hard to watch, so hard to listen to. So then you have a dude who comes out with hearts as his nipples, and he does a weird dance or song, whatever he was doing, right? And then this guy comes back, this Grim Reaper type character, this Horseman of the Apocalypse, and he does a little runway dance for these women, right? And again, these drag queens. And, there's so much of it. The modeling industry is so twisted and, fashion and all these things. I understand that there's this element of France that's, just gone so liberal and so gross. There's the Americans saying, well, USA, USA. That was like a part of this whole thing as well, But that France is like one of the most degraded countries. And this ghoul shows up. There's just weird, sort of flamboyant dancers here. And again, people don't like this stuff or dig it, right? They're not into it. And so, it's disrespectful. Like they want to say they respect other people's beliefs, and they want you to respect their beliefs, but then they force this stuff down your throat. And this horse that rides across the, there's like the river, whatever it was, I forgot the name of the thing, right? Since, I don't know, whatever. Don't tell me, don't care, don't need to know. But this pale rider, this Horseman of the Apocalypse rides through, and the whole thing had this death motif and creepy stuff, and the creature goes across the river here. And they said this was represented the Olympic spirit, and no one would think that, right? And it's dark, and the imagery is dark, and it's, the thing is just, over the top. And again, like, they have a right to represent what they believe. But if they're going to host something that's a global event with all these other countries, and you're just going to shove your twisted beliefs that, that many people don't agree with and don't want their kids seeing. There's another image there of the creature going under the bridge, sort of a mashup image there. And you can really see the pale rider there, and now it's like a ghost, right? It's like the Grim Reaper coming in, with the Horseman of the Apocalypse. And it rides into this stadium, and you can just see, like, it's, this hooded figure. I mean, there's nothing good about this guy. The Grim Reaper, the Death Eaters in Harry Potter that suck the soul out of people's mouths and things like this, right? This Dementors, I guess they were called, or something. These are what, that's what it brings about this image. You can see up there, I'm going to give you, Macron, I think, is up there. I think they're I don't know where they are here. But they have this giant bull there, like the golden bull of Baal. They used to do human sacrifices in front of Baal. And this death-like creature comes in, I think, with a flag, and later maybe the flame. And then there's this guy here, right? This is this is the bigger image of this, worshiping these false idols and things. And again, for a Christian country and for the people watching who are, still a part of that religion in France and around the world, and there's these dudes, that dude there with the Serena Williams. And so, wearing red, the red is very prevalent in this, as a sacrifice and as a, as a ritual. And then, they have the Louvre, of course, which is, the pyramid. I mean, they use the pyramid a lot in illumination productions. Of course, the capstone of the pyramid on the back of the dollar bill, right? And the Freemasonic aspect of these things, the great architects. And then they finish up with the ghoul, Celine Dion, and just apparently she got better from her stiff person syndrome and was able to make an appearance. So why wouldn't I think this is the last Olympics, right? Like everything they showed you there. We have impending World War III, the two dopes that are running for president, both lying, corrupt pieces of crap, and, everything's going on in the world, the degradation of the system, and all this, this Hunger Games, eyes wide shut crap that they're pushing out there is a cult ritual, morally degraded crap, and then, just the end of people believing in God. There's no God in that thing at all. There's nothing that represents God. It's mocking God. But I will say this about the Christians, and I mentioned this in my other video, that the Christian religion was built on force and blood and manipulation and all these things. You had these missionaries, and you had these Christian, the Catholic Church had an army, and then these other, the England, of course, the Church of England had an army, and all the things to do with King Charles and them forcing their religion on the Irish and Scottish people and all the, all these countries they had their own beliefs. They were more Aboriginal. They had their own sort of village-based, Druid type, Indian-based religious, Mother Nature, herbal things and stuff like this. And the Christian religion came in and they made deals with people of power and kings and things like this. And they used the power of the sword and the bow to force their religion on all these European countries. And whenever you use force, there's a backlash. And they changed Jesus' teaching, and they didn't use the examples Jesus set. And they were very manipulative, and they went to these countries all under the guise that these people were going to hell, which was a lie, because they weren't Christians, because their beliefs and their religions are just as good, in many cases better, than the Christian religion. That isn't that great. And if you grew up indoctrinated in it, well, if you're a person seeking truth, you have to figure that out. This is not saying anything bad about Jesus. This is saying what the people did after Jesus died and making this into a power group and then forcing it on people all across the globe, and all these people that suffered because they were being saved forcefully by these armies and, the Crusades and all these things. So all this blood and all this abuse and all this stuff that was done to the Aboriginal peoples and peoples in all these countries, from India to Africa to Australia to Mexico and the, South America and North America and, Canada and all these places, right? All across the globe, Christians went out and tried to force their religion and succeeded in many cases. And there's a backlash for that. And there's a lot of people that are they're either pissed at, the religion and God, or God because of the religion, and they've become atheists because of that, because your religion has sucked, you Christians. You got to own that shit. Like, you can't lie about that anymore. You don't like the way you're being treated and prosecuted. Trump is persecuted. Trump is saying how all Christians are now being persecuted. Well, it's what you did to other people, right? And it's what was done to Jesus, so you should have known better. Like, you guys, forced your belief system on other people, and now it's coming back to you. And so this is part of that. Like, you just have to own that as as a part of your history. You can say, you're a devout Christian, and Christianity's done a lot for you. Great, that's great. But you can't negate your past and the force that was used. And whenever there's force, there's a counterforce. And that's a big part of what's going on here. All right, so let's move on to the Joe Biden thing. Okay, so I think someone just sent me this. Maybe it was on Facebook. Watch Moment Boxer. I man, Khalif batters opponents as two boxers are cleared to fight in Olympics as women despite being rejected from the World Championships. Okay, so what this is about is there's two athletes that they thought were transgender men in the World Championships, so they didn't allow them to fight. And now they're fighting in the Olympics. I'm not sure if they're fighting each other here, or this is a biological man or possibly biological man fighting a biological woman. So you can judge for yourself. That looks like a dude, right? That looks like a man. I mean, just even the haircut. And so that looks like a man. And that looks like a dude. So the Olympics are letting biological men in, and this is what happened during the fight. The man's just pummeling the woman here. I don't know if that's a woman or a I don't know, but it looks more like a woman than the other guy. And so the Olympics are going full whatever it is here. So that's remember I said just let it happen. This is that. And so, this dude wins the fight, and that's, more to speaking of everything that's going on with the Olympics, all this stuff, that we saw during the opening ceremony. So I really want to get to the Joe Biden speech. There's one more thing I want to get to here. Or two more things to do with the Olympics. One is 666, there's been 3 666 sightings that I've seen, and I'll show you the second one, or the third one. I forget what the second one was. I told you the first one, where the guy talked about 666. But this to do with the women's gymnastics team. The women's gymnastics team, U.S. women's gymnastics team, won the gold medal. And Simone Biles, remember, she had the McTwisties. And, she got they celebrated her for, quitting, basically, and not being able to perform what she was able to perform. It became a whole thing that was going on where athletes were not playing and not doing what they were, doing their sport because of psychological issues. And they started celebrating all these athletes and calling them heroes for not, soldiering through their psychological difficulties. And they talked about them quitting, but then they called this the redemption tour for the U.S. women because they were going to redeem themselves for how bad they did during the COVID-stricken games in whatever it was, Tokyo last time. And so how can it be both? Like, how could it be like, oh, wow, you're so brave? They were calling Simone Biles the athlete of the year for not competing and losing, right? And she was like, supposedly the GOAT gymnast. And so there was that. So they redeemed themselves and they won the gold medal last night. And Simone Biles did a floor routine to seal the deal. And this is her score here.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, yeah!
And they know it's official now.
So you see in the corner there, it says 14,666. And, that speaks for herself. So she got a score of 14,666. Tenths of a point, whatever it is. So she got the 666 thing going there. So the Olympics taking place in Paris, and the refs totally rigged the game against the Japanese. Like, it was so obvious and painful. Fans cry foul, officiating in France went over Japan. France got a very questionable call to avoid whistle to avoid upset. France basketball win marred by 2 huge controversies. So I knew about the outcome of this game, right? And like I saw a video, YouTube recommended a video saying France narrowly escapes Japan, and France has this guy Wembanyama and the Stifle Tower, whatever his name is. This two giant 7 foot, over 7 foot, 7'5" guy and a 7'2" guy, and they have a number of other NBA players, and so they're one of the best teams next to America. And Japan has this guy Rui Hachimura, who plays for the Lakers. Another guy plays, he's a shooter, I'm not sure, I think he plays for Phoenix now. And Japan actually played great. And so I decided to watch the end of the game because I already knew the outcome. And I saw the first thing that looked a little bit fishy. And so Rui Hachimura was playing really well. He had 20-something points. And this happened earlier. I didn't see this one.
It's like it was an unsportsmanlike fight.
Okay, so he gives him a little body check there, right? And they call that an unsportsmanlike call, which is, all right, that's kind of an unsportsmanlike call. It's a technical foul, flagrant foul. I don't know what they call it in international rules. Unsportsmanlike foul or an unsportsmanlike play that they, call this technical foul. If you get 2 of these, you get thrown out of the game. So in the NBA, you get a flagrant foul 1 and a 2. And a 2, you get immediately ejected. And a 1, you get a technical foul. You get 2 technical fouls, you get thrown out of the game. And so this might have been a flagrant foul 1, but they play really physically in these, international basketball, FIBA, whatever it's called. So this is questionable. But then here's that dude. There's the Stifle Tower dude. I don't know why I'm not remembering his name. It's early. And he fouls him here. Rudy Gobert. So Rudy Gobert is one Defensive Player of the Year. You might remember him for COVID. When COVID was first coming out, he thought it was a joke, and he touched the microphone like they said you weren't supposed to touch anything. And he touched all the microphones. And then he got COVID, and his team turned on him, and then they canceled everything, remember? So there was like that whole thing. But anyways, he's, kind of a big stiff, and he's a good defensive player, but not so good on offense. And he's not a good foul shooter. So it's smart. He's going to lay the ball in here. He's going to get an easy basket. So making sure he doesn't get a basket and a foul is a smart play here. So you might do, you do a hard foul. You either let him score, or you foul him, and maybe he misses one of the 2 free throws, right? So you save yourself a point here, right? So he grabs his arm and pulls it down. Now I saw this part. Let's sort of fast forwarding towards the end of the game. It's the beginning of the 4th quarter. And I watched a little piece of the game, and Japan was playing really well, right? Japan's down 2 points, and he's their best player. And so they play the thing over and over again here, and they call this an intentional foul and throw the guy out of the game. So he grabs him and pulls him down. It's not really. Like, they play really physical. Like, there's all kinds of plays. Japan has this great little point guard that ended up having 29 points, and he was the star. And they deserve to win this game. They outplayed France. Like down the stretch, and I'll show you that, the real controversial play. But there is, they play real physical. And I want to compare it to another foul that we saw that they didn't call intentional. This is the American game against, I want to say Serbia, but I'm not sure. And the guy just checks him right. The guy, here's a better view of it. And the Team USA is saying this is a flagrant foul. That's an unsportsmanlike play. He hit like 4 or 5 threes, and he hit all the shots. And he was getting on a roll, and this guy came out and just purposely body checked him. It was like, it was not a bad. Way worse than either 2 calls against Rui Hachimura. And I watched this game, and I was like, well, that's kind of effed up, because that should totally be a flagrant foul. And in the basketball game with Japan and France, they had this little point guard who's like incredible. Like they threw out Rui Hachimura, and the guy took over the end of the game. And France was playing sloppy. They threw the ball away a couple of times. And this guy, this little point guard, he got to the basket a couple of times. He had a couple tough threes. And he was getting all these rebounds. And when he'd get a rebound, they'd foul him. And they weren't calling the foul. And they were, the team was bringing up the ball. And the French were sort of body checking the guys. They were being very physical with them, and they weren't calling any fouls, right? And so that was like, well, this is pretty suspect, right? The Rui Hachimura, throwing him out for that, like that's suspect, but not as bad as what was going to happen. So it ends up being that the French play a lot sloppy, and this guy takes over the point guard. He scored like 29 points. He had a bunch of rebounds and assists. I don't know what his stat line was, but he had almost 30 points in this overtime game. And the Japanese go up 4 points, and I know the outcome of the game, and I'm like, how in the world there's like 10 seconds left or something, and the French have the ball and they're down 4, and I'm like, wow, is there going to be a 4-point play? Like, how is it possible that it didn't seem possible France could win this game? And here's the play here. So the French guard gets the ball here, right? And there's, I don't know what the clock says here. There should be. It doesn't say on the, but it's like, I don't know, minimal time, like 4 or 5 seconds left. And he fakes some guy here. And here's a little guy, right? The good, good player for the point guard for the Japanese team. And he's playing defense on this guy. And this guy hits a miracle shot, like a crazy shot, right? And so there's 10 seconds left. Japan's up 4. And this guy hits a shot. Now he gets a foul shot. They're going to tie the game, take it into overtime, where they're going to win. And you don't make that call because it was a desperation shot. He's fading to the right. He's moving to the right. It's crazy he made the shot. I don't think he's that great a shooter. I didn't see him hit any other threes during the part of the game I watched. But he makes a good shot, right? And the issue here is he just doesn't foul him. He doesn't touch him, right? And the ref's right here. And I think they thought, well, he's going to miss the shot. We'll give France a chance because it's the home country. Now, 2 of the refs, there's an American guy, and I don't know what this person is. I don't know. This looks like a woman here. And I don't know what country she represents. I don't think any of them are from France. But look, he's not touching his hand here, right? He's got his hand up here. His left hand sort of was on the guy's side, but he didn't push him. And on a desperation shot, you just don't make this call, right? When there's someone throwing up a heave. But the guy didn't touch him. Like, there's no foul here either. I mean, you didn't have to. Here, you see it from this side, right? So this guy, like, he puts him. No, so he briefly touches him here, right? Which is not a foul. That's not a foul, right? He doesn't push him. His hand's just on him. And so he's close to the guy, right? But he doesn't touch him. Like, he's in good defense. He's in good guarding position here. I'm editing. I just want to add this here. See, the official's eyes are not on his hand that's touching the guy's waist, right? Which isn't a foul anyway, but she's not even looking at that. So she didn't call that as a foul. She's looking up top. She's looking at the release point. She's looking at where he's going to shoot the jumper from his hand and his wrist. And the guy doesn't come anywhere close to either of those things, right? And now he goes straight up, his arm straight up. This hand comes off of him here. And the guy gets off a clean shot. There's no foul there, right? That's just not a foul. And they called that, again, it's a desperation shot. It's a hard shot for the guy to take. He's moving, and he's just throwing. It's not a shot he would take if the team wasn't down 4 points. Like, they needed something. And so he chucks up a 3, and it just happens to go in. Like, it's like one of those low percentage shots. But this guy who's played a great game, like, okay, so he's like, they call a foul and he can't believe it, right? He's like, what? Huh? Like, he didn't touch him, right? And this guy played great. Like, the guy, he was the best player and they got a lucky shot. The 3 should count, right? So they should be down 1. And France still has a chance. There's 10 seconds left. They can foul the Japanese team. Japanese team has to make foul shots. And France would have another shot at a 3. So, the 3 should count. But the foul should not be there. There was no foul there, given how much this guy was harassed and fouled throughout the game. And I'm like, oh, this is bullshit, right? Like, total bullshit. Like, this is totally rigged. And so the guy hits a foul shot, and I stopped watching because I knew what happened. But it was like, Japan deserved to win this game. Like, there was no doubt about it. And the home team is the French. And so, it always looks bad when the home team gets calls like this. And the crowd was going nuts, and it was, and obviously the papers, when mainstream media is covering how fake it is, it's fake. Okay, so I don't know how far I'm along with this video. Obviously, I need to cover the Olympics too today, but this is what I wanted to lead the video with, because something special might be happening here, something magical. So Joe Biden comes out and he outlines 3 Supreme Court reforms he wants Congress to pass right now. And there's no reason for him to do this, right? And so let's get into it here.
And today I'm calling for 3 bold reforms to restore trust and accountability to the court and our democracy. As the press shouted to me as I got off Air Force One, the Republican Speaker of the House said, whatever he proposes is dead on arrival. Well, I think his thinking is dead on arrival.
Okay, so he's really slurring his speech. Now, he's not doing anything else. He's not campaigning. He's not hobnobbing. Met the guy from Israel, but he's not really out there as president, right? So they said he had COVID, and they've been hiding him away. He withdrew. He disappeared for like a week or two. And he's come back, and he is not as good as he was, right? And so some 2 beautiful things are happening here. One, he's deteriorating. I mean, like he deserves it, and whatever it is. And the Democratic Party deserves it. Kamala deserves it. But also, they're not hiding him away. So they should just hide him away. All the attention's on Kamala. He's basically showing everybody he can't be president. He's worse now than he is in the debate. You can see he's farther gone. He's reading here, and he's slurring his speech. You can't really understand. He's mumbling. And he's got one thing to do in 2 weeks. He's not even active. And so he's just so far gone.
First.
And so what he's just said here is that the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, or whatever the F his name is, has said that any of these Supreme Court reforms aren't going to pass the Congress. And so it's dead on arrival. So there's no reason for him to even say this, right? And he's campaigning for the Democrats and Kamala. And this is, again, a press conference, another sort of, official presidential event. He's not supposed to do that. But Trump isn't complaining because every time JoJo goes out there, he reminds everybody that he's been senile for a long time, right?
I'm calling for a constitutional amendment.
Again, he can't pronounce any of these words because the amendment is just slurring his speech.
Called No One is Above the Law Amendment.
No One's Above the Law Amendment? That's going to be the name of the amendment?
It holds.
Woo! Woo!
And I mean this sincerely. It holds that no.
I mean this sincerely. That's one of his catchphrases, which means he's lying the rest of the time,
Immunity for crimes former president committed while in office. I share our founders' belief that president must answer to the law. The president is accountable.
This is technically a good thing. There should be no immunity for Trump or any president. It's a bad thing to say a president can do whatever they want and not be charged with crimes. I mean, that's against everything America stands for. The whole Supreme Court thing is a joke. Of course, he and the Democrats, went after Trump because the controllers wanted them to. I mean, it's part of a plan, but they don't know that, right? And all of it is giving, dictatorship-like power to the presidency, which eventually is going to bite America in the ass, right? But that's not what I'm talking about here. We're talking about his
accountable in the exercise of the great power of the presidency. We're a nation of laws, not kings and dictators.
He has this thing where he's mumbling, low energy, and then he shouts.
The decision can be boiled down to the title of one case: Trump versus the United States. The court asserted it was making a ruling for the ages. That isn't true. The court made a ruling for one, a former president. No other president in our history has asked for this kind of immunity for criminal actions. And no president, no former president, not me, not one, has and should have been given any exception.
So he's lost it, right? He's gone. He's farther gone now. Again, this isn't an interview where he's asked questions. This is something where he's reading from a teleprompter. And he's had nothing but time to prepare for this event. He's been gone. He's only had 3 or 4 in the past, 2 or 3 weeks since he withdrew. He's only had a few public appearances. And again, he didn't have COVID, so they're like he's having episodes, and they just won't hide the guy away, right? They're putting him out here, and so there's no reason for him to be out there. There's just nothing. There's no reason. Like Kamala's camp must be going crazy, and it's the same camp, because every time he shows his face, it reminds people that we had a senile president, that she somehow is, for now, escaping her part in that, right? She's completely complicit in supporting a guy who couldn't do the job, saying how, masterful and how alert he was behind closed doors, and we know that isn't true, right? And so this is horrible for the Democrats and her and him, and they won't hide him away. All they do is hide him away, right? Like they did with Reagan. When Reagan had dementia, they got 9 months and they just hide him away, especially up until the election. But every time they put him out here, it reminds people, and he's going to deteriorate. He's going to have an episode. Like he's going to have this thing where he's going to walk around, he's going to be confused and lost. And it's going to be, it'll be so bad that it'll dominate the news cycle. And it'll remind everybody of the Democratic Party debacle with this guy. And so it's a wonderful thing. Like I thought they were going to hide him away, and now I'm like, oh, we might get to see him completely deteriorate, right? It's a possibility now, a strong possibility. This guy's going to be drooling on himself and just completely lost, like clueless. Pooping his pants or doing something. Like there'll be event that everyone will be like, holy shit, did that just happen? Because they won't hide him away. Their arrogance, Jill and them, like they still think this guy's rocking it, right?
To this, with such immunity. The second thing I'm asking for, we've had term limits for presidents of the United States for nearly 75 years after the Truman administration. And I believe we should have term limits for Supreme Court justices of the United States as well.
It's like canned applause. But then you have to do Senate and Congress, and you have to deal with the fact that Nancy Pelosi and, Democrats and Republicans are making bank off of like he did, and Dianne Feinstein died with $110 million of assets, right? Nancy Pelosi's husband getting inside trader information.
In fact, the United States is the only major constitutional democracy that gives lifetime seats in their high court. Term limits would help ensure that the court membership changes with some regularity. That would make timing for the court's nomination more predictable.
Now you can't, his voice gets hoarse all the time. He coughs. He can't talk through things, right? This happened during the debate, and it's happened every time since. Like he just can't do it. This is 5 minutes long, right?
Unless arbitrary. Reduce the chance that any single presidency imposes undue influence in generations to come. The bipartisan commission I convened analyzed various term limit structures. Based on their report, I believe the best structure is the 18-year term limit. That would help ensure the country would not have what it has now, an extreme court that's proud of an attack on the confirmation process that's been weaponized by those seeking to carry out an extreme agenda for decades to come. By the way, these guys mean it. These guys mean it.
He's breaking from the thing here.
Project 2025 is real. They mean it. Third, I'm calling for a binding code of conduct for the Supreme Court.
So that's a political statement, right? He's not supposed to be doing that. Woo.
Supreme Court's current ethics code is weak and even more frightening, voluntary. Voluntary.
Wait, say it again.
Any code of Congress must be enforceable.
Enforceable.
Under the reform I propose, justice would be required to disclose gifts, refrain from public political activity, recuse themselves in cases in which they or their spouses have a financial or other conflict of interest.
Clarence Thomas.
Most people don't realize that Congress passed a law decades ago that says all federal judges including Supreme Court justices, have to recuse themselves in such cases. But the current justices insist on enforcing that requirement themselves without any public oversight or compulsion. See, that's their decision. They don't have to tell us how they made it. That might work if the court was actually enforcing those requirements, but they are not. The court is not self-policing. The court is not dealing with the obvious conflicts of interest. We need a mandatory code of ethics for the Supreme Court, and we need it now.
So, he's deteriorating. And what he's saying here is true. They should totally do that. The Supreme Court's like, the whole government needs oversight. Like, everything's just so corrupt and whatever. But that's neither here nor there. That's, whatever. Like, they're not going to fix this mess. But, again, they could just disappear the guy. But either he or they or whoever his handlers are, whatever, they just won't do it. And he's going to be out there, and it's going to be something. Like, he's deteriorating really fast, right? He's had this problem. Let's go this other. So Joe Biden ripped off, Reagan went senile himself, and he deteriorated really fast, right? Over those last couple of years, they did not roll him out. Like, he was just non-existent as president. They hit him completely away. His son admitted that he had Alzheimer's. But Reagan was an actor, and he nailed this quote. Biden does not. And then he gets mad at the National Guard who he's talking to. This is wonderful. I saw the gaffe before, but I didn't know he had stolen it from Reagan.
My Coast Guard aides have been excellent. One of them taught me that, and I quote, "The Coast Guard is that hard nucleus about which the Navy forms in time of war."
I can only assume that you will enjoy educating your family about how the Coast Guard is, quote, "the hard nucleus around the Navy forms in times of war."
See, he missed the about which. So it doesn't make any sense that he butchered the sentence. But then he gets pissed at the Coast Guard.
You're a really dull class. I mean, come on, man. Is the sun getting to you? I would think you'd have an opportunity when I say that about the Navy to clap, but being here together.
So the issue with this is he butchered the quote, plus it's a totally different time, right? So, I mean, this is how many years ago? 1988, so that's 33 years ago. And it's a totally different time. Reagan was a totally different president. And, the Coast Guard is a group of different people. And what he said didn't make any sense at all. And who knows how much this was staged with Reagan. But he knew Reagan got applause because he's stealing the quote. But he doesn't nail the quote. And it's just, he's always had this plagiarism problem. And he forces them for some applause, which was like goofy. And this is in 2021. And he was not making good decisions then. He was showing signs of dementia in 2019 when he was campaigning, probably before that, Parkinson's. And he's getting stiffer and stiffer. And, he can't walk, he can't talk, he can't, it's just awkward movements. And they're rolling him out there. They're just letting this happen. And I'm glad they are. Like, I thought they'd guide him away once they got him out of there, but they're not. And, every day you're seeing this guy is unfit for president is a great day for me. It's a wonderful day. So Trump is pussing out over the debate.
Here's more of my interview with former President Trump. They're also attacking you for other ridiculous reasons. They're saying that you said to a crowd of Christians that they won't have to vote in the future.
Yeah, let me say what did I mean by that. I had a tremendous crowd speaking to Christians. I mean, this was a crowd that liked me a lot. I think,
which is really important, right? He's talking about this more and more. he's talking about how much they love him and like him. It's really strange, you know. It's not strange. He's a narcissist, and this is him, but he's obsessed with this.
7% or something. And they're treated very badly by this administration, okay? Catholics are treated unbelievably. They're like persecuted. And if I might say, before I go into the other, Jewish people, if you're Jewish and you vote for Biden or the Democrats or Kamala or whoever's going to run, I guess it's going to be her. But if you voted for her or the Democrats, you should have your head examined. Because
have your head examined, Jewish people.
nobody's ever been treated so badly by this. This administration is destroying Israel, et cetera, et cetera. So
yeah, they're speaking up. They're the most meekest, mildest, you know, limp dick type of way about a genocide that Israel's perpetrating on Palestine. Right, Trump? Is that it? You know, this is how bad he sucks.
with respect to like a statement like I made, that statement is very simple. I said, vote for me. You're not going to have to do it ever again. It's true. Because we have to get the vote out. Christians are not known as a big voting group. They don't vote.
And What's he talking about? Like, he says two really stupid things here.
Explaining that to him. You never vote. This time, vote. I'll straighten out the country. You won't have to vote anymore. I won't need your vote. You can go back to
you meant you don't have to vote for you because you have 4 years in office.
Look. Christians are known. You know who else doesn't vote? Gun owners don't vote.
But what are you talking about? So Christians and gun owners are huge voters, right? Gun owners are always voting. And Christians, and it's a cross-sectional group. And these Christians he's talking about, you know, the Republicans get out and vote, right? You know, remember when they had the first American Idol and Simon Cowell wanted some other, like some African-American girl, like he was favoring her, and there was a few other people. And Kelly Clarkson, like, won in a landslide. It's because she was Southern from Texas. I mean, anytime they had like those shows, what's that, like The Voice? You know, I don't watch these shows, but my sense of it is that they always win. Like country singers always win. Remember when Garth Brooks was outselling everybody in terms of, you know, musical sales? Southern people and, you know, Christians and Republicans, they vote, right? They vote a lot more. They're into it. They're more into the patriotic aspect. Liberals and, you know, people who, maybe talk a big game and they'll pontificate and they'll talk about stuff at a coffee shop. Won't bother voting, right? So the Christians and the conservatives, they get out most of their vote. The Republicans can get out a lot more of their vote. It's just that there's more liberals and there's more people that are potentially Democratic voters. And so they're always trying to get out the vote. But he's saying that Christians don't vote. It's a stupid thing to say, right? And it really doesn't explain him saying you only have one more time to vote, right? Because this is going to be an ongoing problem because the population demographics are swaying over to the Democrats. And the Republican Party has to change drastically or it's going to be overrun. Like, they have to find new groups of people because their group of people is shrinking, right? A lot of the Republicans are older. They're dying out. It's just like the news media, right? All this, people watch mainstream media.
Just to be clear, what you're saying, though, you're not saying it's being interpreted as you are not surprised to hear by the left as well. They're never going to have another election. He's saying there's not. So
first time I've even heard.
Can you even just
first time I've even heard this? You don't watch the news. They're not talking to you about this. Your handlers and people around you should have talked about this.
Respond to that.
I said Christians. I started off by saying, just so you understand, you never vote. Christians do not vote well.
You didn't say that. I watched the clip. You did.
They vote in very small percentages. Why? I don't know. Maybe they're disappointed in things that are happening. But for a long time, I say, you don't vote. I'm saying go out. You must vote. November 5th is going to be the most important election in the history of our country. Whether you vote early or not, we should have, by the way, one-day voting. We should have voter ID. We should have proof of citizenship. And we should have paper ballots, okay? That's what we should have, but we don't have that. But I said to the Christians in the room, thousands of them, I said, typically Christians do not vote. Why it is, I don't know. You're rebelling.
And so, yeah, it's being shown on the internet, but the people that are going to a rally are going to vote, right? The people, if they're going to a Trump rally, they're going to vote, right? I mean, even the protesters are going to vote. Like, what you're talking about, people who are going to go to a rally will vote. It's not that hard to vote. You know, like, those people are all voting, right?
Rebellious, something's going on. Don't worry about the future. Vote on, you have to vote on November 5th. After that, you don't have to worry about voting anymore. I don't care, because we're going to fix it. The country will be fixed, and we won't even need your vote anymore, because frankly, we will have such love. If you don't want to vote anymore, that's okay. And I think everybody understood it. I didn't know there was any.
Yeah, well,
no one understood it. Now we understand it less. You're saying that you're going to do such a wonderful job in the next 4 years that you're going to have so much love, but it isn't going to be you. It's going to be whoever they put, in your place, that you're going to win. You're going to win from there on out. The Republicans will always win because you did such a great job. Like, it's silly to say that, right? Look at what happened after your first term. You didn't fix shit, right? You didn't, you weren't getting all that much love. What are you talking about? You're going to have a majority that you're going to sway the people that hate you, or some percentage of them, and then you're going to pass it over to J.D. Vance, and he's going to. It's silly. The whole thing is stupid, and the premise is wrong because Christians totally vote. Okay, so we know this here. Just fact check. Trump's wrong. Gun owners were likely to vote, which we know. Gun owners are a big voting bloc, right? That's why you saw, like, there's pictures like Bill Clinton with the guns, and Joe Biden talks about how he owns a shotgun, and Democrats are always shooting guns because they want to show that they're gun owners too, right? Because Republicans always do it. Some book called The Gun Gap, it says here that analyzed 2 public databases that have tracked American attitudes for decades to conclude that gun owners are more likely to vote compared with non-owners. The gap is widening, and the more guns one owns, the more likely a person is to vote. It's a big issue. People with guns and who want to keep their guns are worried that their guns are being taken. I mean, it's silly for Trump to say that. Like, everybody knows this, right? And most white Americans who regularly attend worship voted for Trump in 2020. It says here that that midterm elections last year, a new breakdown of voters cast show that evangelicals and white Roman Catholics overwhelmingly supported the party, the Republican Party. And we know this, right? George W. Bush pretended to be an evangelical Christian. He wasn't. Like, he wasn't a Christian at all. And he totally, used the language of the evangelicals. Now Trump is doing the same thing because they're a big voting bloc. So here is an abstract here. The person did, and he used this analysis here and all this stuff that he did. He said, how he came about this. And he said, based on the results, I was able to reject the null hypothesis that being a Christian had no effect on whether an individual votes. Based on my research, Christians are much more likely to vote than non-Christians, which is a known thing. We know this, right? Southern people and Republicans are more likely to vote. It's just that the Democrats have a bigger pool of potential voters if they can get the vote out. And one of the ways they get the vote out is hatred of Trump. So Fishboy's explanation is stupid. It makes things worse because none of it's true, right? There's no real explanation for what he said. I don't think he was saying that he was going to become dictator. He's old and he's not going to last. I mean, he might start deteriorating. He's already starting to deteriorate too. And he's, I don't think he can even make a case for another term after this. His presidency must be a nightmare. It'll be much worse than the first one. And it'll be the effects would be devastating. And that's what it looks like we're heading to. Of course, look, he's got nothing here. No evidence of any kind of damage to his ear, like we talked about.
I mean, because it's the constant refrain. I mean, after they have done all the things that we've talked about tonight,
horrible,
all of the things,
horrible things,
Russia, and all the things,
and dump their guy of 52 years, just dump him to the side. So they do all that.
He's senile. Like, you didn't dump him. I mean, you guys have been talking about him being senile, and now you're like, I can't believe they dumped him. What are you talking about?
And then they say, well, no, you can't vote for him because he's literally never going to leave office. They're actually still saying that.
Yeah. It's just unbelievable.
But you will leave office after 4 years.
By the way, and I did last time. I kept hearing, he's not going to leave, he's not going to leave. Look, they are the ones that are a threat to democracy. Number one, they had an incompetent man as president, okay? Now they have somebody who's worse. She's sort of incompetent. She's not very smart, but she's very radical.
Okay, so there was that part about it. But here,
it went down in flames for them last time, but they think this is they're going to get you. So you've been kind of a little unclear about whether you're going to debate or not. Will you commit tonight to debating Kamala
So I
Harris?
like debating. I like debating.
he likes debating.
I've done a lot of debates, and I've won the debates. I think they say I won the election because of that. I don't mind. They were pushing for this early debate. I said, why do we want to do an early debate? It didn't make sense to me. It turned out I was right, but for the wrong reason.
So this is a big reveal. Well, we knew this already. But they were pushing for an early debate. They never debate before the convention. You had two candidates who hadn't been confirmed as the candidates. Why in the world would you debate before then? Because the Democratic Party wanted to show people what Joe Biden was like. And this is the case that they wanted to get rid of him. But the people inside the Joe Biden people, why did they agree to it? Like, are they so oblivious to how bad he was? Because, like, they never have an early debate. And Trump's saying they pushed for the early one. And it was disastrous, right? Now, this part's also kind of a reveal.
Right? I want to do a debate, but I also can say this. Everybody knows who I am, and now people know who she is. She's a radical left lunatic. She'll destroy.
No, that's not, she's still undefined. A debate would be really important. Most people are watching the news, fish boy.
Our country. She wants open borders.
And why not debate her?
Well, wait. But because they already know everything.
Because they already know everything, so you don't. But you guys already debated. You and Biden already debated, right? Why did you debate to Biden? Why did you debate to Biden? Because you knew he was senile, and you knew that you would crush him, and you weren't like a slam dunk. You knew how it would go. Like, it's amazing that they rolled Biden out for that thing, knowing what he was like. But of course, maybe they, like I said, they wanted to get rid of him. But what are you saying? They know, like, he's just such a liar. Like, you don't want to debate her because you guys think that you have this locked up. If you didn't, you'd be debating her, right? Because a debate would show people the annoying. People have to get a good taste of Kamala, a good dose of Kamala before they get annoyed by her, because they don't really know who she is, because she didn't run for office before, and so she's going to have more money than you, and who knows how this thing's going to go. So you must really believe that you're going to win, because he didn't debate Hickey Nailey, right? Because he didn't debate any of the Republican challengers because he knew he was going to win, right?
She wants to defund our police. She wants no bail. She wants no cash. You kill somebody and we're going to release you immediately. They call it cashless. By the way, this has been a horrible thing for our country. This has been what I just said. But we know where she is. She wants high taxes.
Well, they're going to say you're afraid of debating her. That's what they're going to say.
Well, they said that with Biden, too. I was afraid. I did great with Biden, and I did great in every debate. I've had a lot of debates.
But you're winning on all the issues,
But,
right?
I'm leading in the polls by, I think, a lot. I don't know. I hear different numbers. But I'm leading in all of the polls. I'm leading big in all of the swing states. And I say this. The answer is yes, I'll probably end up debating. I think, actually, the debate should take place before the votes start being cast. I had a very good second debate with Biden. I really beat him badly. The problem was 30-40% of the votes were already cast.
But I thought that he cheated.
If you're going to have a debate, you got to do it, I think, before the votes are cast. I think it's very important that you do that. So the answer is yes. But I can also make a case for not doing it. Also, I don't like rewarding fake news. I don't like rewarding the people that have been up. They're going to make tens of millions of dollars with this debate. I don't like ABC. I think it's a terrible, terrible outfit. I don't like that ABC is going to get rich. George Slopadopoulos, as I call him. I don't like these are such bad people. I don't like that ABC is going to get rich. I don't like, and I will say something, that when CNN did the last one, they were very fair. Jake Tapper.
Okay, so
was very fair.
Okay, so I'm editing. I'm getting to a point where I want to do a voiceover and just explain there's going to be a huge, I was pretty much going to wrap the video up after I showed you a little Kamala Harris stuff. Yesterday, then all this stuff happened, and I'm still dissecting it. But anyways, just to say here, The reason Jake Tapper was fair is because they wanted to get rid of Biden. The reason they debated him ahead of time is they wanted to get rid of Biden, right? Like him saying, like that big reveal where he says, or maybe I haven't gotten there yet, but he says that Biden said that it was Biden's team that wanted to debate early. I guess that just happened.
Well, maybe just you and her, Vice President Harris in a room together with no moderators.
I don't mind that. I don't mind anything. Look, I don't mind. We can do any form of a debate. You know, when they asked me to do the debate, they didn't think I was going to do it because they were going to offer. They offered me the two.
Okay, so he really can't put this out just for. We want to see a debate. Like we want to see it. Like we wanted to see the Joe Biden one, and that one went great, and we wanted to see this one. Kamala Harris, let's get into her here.
So the momentum in this race is shifting.
So you're still behind.
And there are signs that Donald Trump is feeling it.
She has this fake swagger now, this Barack Obama cadence. She grew up in an intellectual household. Her mom was a, college professor, as was her dad, right? Okay, so a lot has happened. I'm in the editing process here. It's Thursday, August 1st. And, Trump went to meet with the black journalists and had this, they're calling it a meltdown. I'm calling it Trump being Trump. Just a kind of a disaster on his part, but hilarious. And he's going to go after Kamala's Indian heritage. She's going to say she always talked about being Indian, and all of a sudden she wanted to be black, and that didn't happen. Now, again, this is all going to cover this year. And then she's got a whole bunch of stuff where she's trying to, all her events are going after black voters, which seems odd because if she doesn't have the black vote, then where is she? So I get into all that. That's all going to be coming up here. But I just wanted to say this because most people don't understand where I'm coming from, right? And, for me, there are things that I know I do well. I was always sort of a chronic underachiever. Really never understood the American system. Was very not motivated. Didn't see a reason for the kind of material success that is a part of the American dream and all of it, right? I've talked about this at length in the Journey series. But there are things that I had growing up, initially coming in to this life, that most people won't understand. And it's, the part where I, have evolved in some way. And no matter how much I explain it, most people won't get it. Like, I understand where they're coming from because it was in my face my whole life. Like, I didn't understand it at first as I grew up, right? But I don't have the need to, somehow bolster my, whatever you're going to call it, self-esteem. I got a few comments from people saying self-love is I said that you can't love yourself, right? I said loving yourself is impossible. So the first one is, bro, I disagree with you. I disagree with you on loving yourself. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. How do you not? Well, the Bible is not anything to me, right? How do you know it's not an authority? But how do you know how to love anyone if you don't love yourself? You can absolutely hate yourself, so the reverse must be true too. Love and hate are not opposites, and so I'll explain that in a second. If you can't love yourself, you can't love others. Another person says that similar point of view, right? And that's not true at all, right? There are plenty of people who hate themselves who are capable of loving. There's plenty of people who think that they're the worst pieces of crap and they love, sometimes you love someone who isn't good for you. Love isn't a choice. You can cultivate love. Like you can go into something with the right attitude. You like arranged marriages in India where they go into it without really knowing the person. Many times they're children. And, they hang around the person. They're with the person enough. And eventually you'll love them. Like that happens, right? And so this stupid idea that these people are throwing out there, if you can't love yourself, you can't love anybody else. That's not true. Loving thyself is an ego. Like you're doing that as an ego. you can feel love. And I feel love all the time because of the Sizemore system, the transmission that's given. Like I feel love in the heart all the time, right? And like I'll be meditating in the middle of the night. Sometimes I'm up like, I can't go to sleep, or I wake up in the middle of the night and I just feel the energy coming. There's an energy that comes in the Sizemore system, the divine energy. It's divine grace that falls into your heart. And like, as much of an asshole as I am, like I feel love all the time. Like it's a blessing. I've always had a loving heart, right? Even my ex who, thinks as badly about me as, anybody, right, or worse, said to my kids all the time, he has a difficult personality, but you'll never find a person with a more loving heart than him. That was her description of me, right? And I feel love, like, and my wife will be sleeping, I'll give her a hug, like I want to express the love. I want the love to, I want her to have some of it, right, or whatever, or all of it, or whatever. The love is passing through. In the Sizemore system, you're a conduit, and love passes through you. It's the nature of love. Love isn't, you can like somebody, like that's a personal preference. You can, enjoy something. Something can make you laugh. You can, there's different ways that you could have a positive feelings about somebody or negative feelings about somebody or something. You can have an aversion to something. You can be attracted to things, right? But love is just something that stands alone. Love is like none of those other things. A lot of people haven't really experienced love and they don't know what they're talking about. They think that their love, like when people talk about love being, when Trump says the audience loves him, that means it's just giving him positive energy. But love isn't anything to do with stuff that your ego likes. Love is a feeling, a deep feeling that your ego can't understand. Your ego doesn't know what love is. Your ego has no idea of experiencing love. In fact, the ego is incapable of that. It's your heart, and your brain is incapable of even thinking about love. Love, you can describe it with like words, but your brain's like an unfeeling computer. You have a heart that experiences love. If you have a developed heart, you can experience love, right? If you've developed your etheric heart, and lots of people have it. And so, like dogs are very affectionate, and you would say dogs are very loving, but they have, in terms of their chakras, their energy centers, they have up to the heart region. They have the things, you have these chakras, the lower level spiritual points. But, people have a fully developed heart center, and dogs are like just, one of the animals that just has some of that, right? Dogs and animals are just, in the initial stages of feeling love, but for them, it's more happiness and emotion and, wagging the tail, very physical. But love is a deep feeling, right? That, you're in a way slave to your love because your love is something that you don't choose. The people in your life that you love, a lot of times you don't want to love them, or maybe they don't even deserve it, or whatever it is, right? Because you don't choose it. It's not something that can be chosen. It's either there or it's not. There are cases where people have the ideal marital partner. The person is maybe, really good looking or something, or, just smart or whatever it is, right? All the things that people want in a person. Like a great person, people say you should marry that person. And that person may totally love you. And you're just not capable of loving them. It's just not there, right? And like on paper, they're intellectually, they're the ideal person for you. But the feeling never is there, right? There's no connection. And there's people who are wonderful people that you could see, oh, wow, that person would make a wonderful spouse. But if you meet them and talk to them, you're like, well, I kind of like this person, but there's no love there. It's something, it's beyond a person's ability to cultivate and choose, right? And, there's an interesting part of this in terms of the Sizemore system, the second master of the system, Babaji. He wanted to help people love God, but he realized that lots of people didn't have the ability for the idea of an abstract God, like just in terms of an object of meditation. So he started with the supposition of divine light, because people couldn't really think of God. Like that's why God is pictured in heaven by the Christians and the Jews as this, this sitting on a throne, right? God is powerful. God is an idol. God is Moloch the bull, or these various other Baal the bull. I mean, these various entities, right? And so, these idols and whatever it might be, or God is the sun, or God is whatever in nature, or God as a human being like Jesus, right? But people can't conceive of God as some abstract idea, the essence of love, right? The feeling of love. And he wanted to help people cultivate this love for God. And he came up with this idea of constant remembrance, of remembering God and thinking about God being there instead of you when you did your daily activities. And, the divine master as well in your system. And what that would do is he said that if you remembered something, you would love it. And this is the idea of a spiritual master being, people being able to love a spiritual master as like a thumbnail for God, like as God's representative. But ultimately, people have to be able to love the essence of love that they feel in their hearts, right? And if you remember something, as you think about it, you eventually will love it because you just become more and more, focused on something and the essence of it, especially if it's something of, higher nature, like love or God is of a higher nature. And so the more you think about God, eventually you start loving God, right? The more that you connect and want to associate yourself with God. And so these are all like interesting things in terms of, the cultivation of love. And, in terms of the things that I have coming in, I don't need things that other people need. There's things that I wanted to success for myself, or things like, I wanted externally some positive regard, right? But like I found that I didn't need it once I had it. Like I was like, oh, that's not such a good thing. Like I don't need people to thumbs up the thing. I don't need people telling me how great I am. I don't need to feel good about myself based in my physical, appearance and being like, the demographics, being a man, being white, being, or whatever it is, right? Tan, so, and I don't need like, oh, I have to feel good about my culture. Like being an American, saying USA, USA, that I don't feel part of that. Like, if somebody is successful in the Olympics as an American, I don't feel like I could root for them, sure, if I like the person, but just because they're American doesn't mean I have anything to do with it, right? Like I don't feel American. Like, I don't, of course I have the cultural, when I first went to India and I met Europeans who clearly looked down on Americans. And as I acted like an American, I could see that they were prejudiced against me and I was pissing them off, right? Which kind of made me like, just because I think that shit's funny, make me be more American, right? But like, I didn't feel anything towards their Europeanness, right? And I saw some stuff because I see stuff. I saw things that made their cultural upbringing, right? Based in their demographics, I see things all the time. But I don't, I don't make a big deal about it. Do you understand what I'm saying? Maybe I'm not making this clear. But if somebody who was American is successful, I don't feel like pride or like I'm a part of that because I'm not, right? Also, I'm Sicilian, Irish, German, and Albanian. And if you talk shit about any of those cultures, it does not hurt my feelings. Like if someone tried to make fun of me for being Italian, because I don't feel Italian, right? I mean, I don't even feel American. Like that's, you can say things about me as a person. And I'm like, it used to hurt my feelings. Now less and less as I got older. But even then it really didn't hurt my feelings because I knew they were true, right? Like, if somebody said something that was true, I was like, yeah, that's true. I wasn't like all defensive because like I don't have that kind of need for identification with something as a person, whether it be being American, whether it be, being Italian or Irish or German or, living, in Connecticut or a school spirit or any of these things. Like I don't have, this essence of pride or this thing that I, feel like people who are like me, even if someone had all my ethnic, if someone else was Italian, Irish, German, and Albanian and looked like me and had the same name as me or whatever, like, any number of things, and they were competing, I wouldn't like feel some sort of identification with them, right? You could make fun of my religion, being Catholic, or, this and that, and, my family, my parents, like I didn't, none of those things bothered me, right? Like it just didn't matter to me. It doesn't matter to me. And it's, I didn't understand it and I didn't know it was like a good thing or a bad thing, but now I see it's something that I'm blessed with, right? It's an evolution of understanding that you're a soul. And like when I was young, I couldn't understand. I had this knowledge, but it wasn't available to me because I hadn't evolved into it. I didn't have the conceptual ability as a child. Although, when I saw my grandfather, my grandfather is German descent. And, he was a kind of a tough guy. He fought in 2 world wars. One, he volunteered when he was 15 and played professional football for $10 a game, before it was a thing. And, he did all these things, right? He caught a world record, I think, Sergeant Major Fish years and years ago. Of course, I'm sure that record's been, he was in the Guinness Book of World Records. Like, he was a fireman and saved people's lives. And he used to take me fishing and all these things, right? And so I'll put that as my picture for this whole thing. My picture was my grandfather with me and him, and him holding fish and things like this, right? We were in his backyard in Florida. He took this picture, and I have that picture. That's like one of, I think, my only pictures of him. But he dies, right? And like I see his body, and I'm 10 years old. I thought I was actually younger as I remembered it, but now I looked at it. I think I'm 10 or 11 years old, and I'm looking at him. And they put lipstick on him. And my grandfather was not that kind of guy, right? Like, he's not a guy, his lips were blue, and they tried to cover it over with lipstick. And it's just a corpse. And, the essence of my grandfather was gone. I'm like, this is kind of weird. We're looking at this corpse, this like hunk of human flesh, it's like going to the grocery store and looking at steaks, right? It's not a cow anymore, right? The essence of what made him my grandfather was gone. And it was the first time I really, saw a dead body. I mean, it was the first funeral. We were at this wake. And, like, I had no feeling to him. Like, my grandfather's, that's not my grandfather. Like, he's not there. It wasn't like he was sleeping. His essence wasn't there. The presence wasn't there. And I could feel the energy. And, like, I couldn't articulate it as a 10-year, 11-year-old kid. But I knew it. Like, I knew that there's a soul that's in people, and that's what you think of them. And when you see a dead body, the soul's gone, and it's no longer there. The essence of what made my grandfather was his soul. And, like, I understood this at, a very young age, and even more so now, right? And so there's these American Legion, which later on I would go to, and it was a bar. And it made me understand. When I was in college, back when I was using drugs, and like I dropped out of my first year of college, I worked at Kmart. I ended up moving down there in Florida. I was in Florida for a bit. My parents retired there. I'd go see my grandfather in Florida from Connecticut. And there was these American Legion guys that came in. They were veterans. They were part of this veterans club. My grandfather used to go there. And they were drunk, and one of them, one guy was really obese and didn't fit into his uniform anymore. And he had his chin strap, his helmet didn't fit him, and he came by, farted, and they were standing next to my grandfather's casket, and they looked like ridiculous. And my dad and I just started cracking up. And we're at my grandfather's funeral. We're sitting in the front, my grandmother's getting really upset, and I always had a problem where, and even now, when I'm not supposed to laugh, that is really hilarious to me. I've talked about this in video, so I'm cracking up and laughing. And, it seems like, I love my grandfather. He's my favorite person. And, got a lot of things from him, some of his abilities and some of the things I do now as a farmer, his athletic ability, some of these things, right? There's things I inherited from him, right? And so it might have seemed like it was disrespectful, me and my dad cracking up. My dad, it was my mom's, my mom was really upset too. But, I couldn't articulate it to him, but I'm like, this is silly. Why are we sitting there in front of this, this corpse that isn't my grandfather, pretending, looking at it, and what I mean? People are touching it, and, you look at the corpse and you weep. It's, the only thing the corpse does is show you, oh yeah, he's dead. That's him, that's his body, but he's gone. And, I later learned in the spiritual ancient tradition of India, they burn the corpse because, for one, the soul might try to hang around the corpse. It might get lost. It won't go back. It won't go where it needs to go into another etheric world. Sometimes it'll try to even get back into its body. The soul will, even though the body is no longer alive. And the other thing is, when you grieve for excessive period of time. You have to grieve for some period, and it's right to. But you're holding on because the soul will hang around you, and it needs to go where it needs to go. But it'll hang around you because you're craving it and you're pulling it towards you through your love and grief and things. And the soul will, still be with you, but it needs to go, back to its original source. And you're holding it there by thinking about it and holding on to it. And, that's why, you just pray for it to go where it needs to go, right? You thank it for its, the soul of your loved one for being with you, right? And so, the soul consciousness is so limited in the American point of view. People identify with their demographics, who they are as a person. They want to be a part of groups of people, and I just never had that. It's something that I have that's more evolved than the average person. And my insights, a lot of it come from that, whatever I've done in a previous existence. And so when I talk about somebody like Kamala Harris here, who tries to pretend to be something she's not. She's an elitist. She comes from an elite family. And her demographic makeup, is going to include a grandfather who was he was an Irish slave owner, and he owned black people, and that's part of her that's part of her genealogy. She has his genes in him, right? That of a slave owner who was really into slavery, and that's only like a great grandfather or whatever it was, right? It's only a few generations removed, and she has that in her, right? And she has these different, her genetic makeup, but she also has her, who she was as a person. And she's, lived in college towns, and she has these various things. And she's trying to be something she's not, right? She's trying to pretend that she had the African-American experience of, poverty and prejudice and things that you associate some of these negative things and the swagger. And she never had that, right? And Trump is talking about that, but he can't articulate it like I am because he's a dope. And he misses the central point of it. Because he's a fake and a fraud too. Trump pretends to be a Republican when he never was, right? But people want to associate with these groups, associate with, whatever it might be, to define themselves, right? Like in some way. And I don't need that. Like as I've gotten older, I've needed it less and less. I don't have to be an American. I don't have to be any of these things. Like even a dad or whatever it is. Like to feel good about myself as like some sort of label or titles. I just have to, as a meditator, I look at what I am and I see what I need to improve and I see what I'm doing well. And, I can accept that about myself. Like I don't need these other, materialistic, physical attributes to, build my self-esteem. This whole idea that people talk about self-love. Like I don't need that stuff. I feel God's love inside of me and it passes through me. And that's all it can ever be. You're never going to become, in a sense, love itself. Unless you merge into the divine source. But you can, be a conduit for God's love. And then be a loving person through that energy. And that doesn't mean you're complimenting people all the time or you're really super sweet or nice. It means that the energy that is love flows through you. And other people can feel it and benefit from that as everyone's craving love, right? And so it's a complete different point of view than you see with most people. So I'm talking about Kamala Harris and all these people. It's just ego bullshit, and Trump as well. And, trying to be president, who cares? Like, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean you're no longer a piece of shit, right? Just because you're a president. It doesn't mean you're a success. Like, yeah, you won an election, right? Did you cheat? Of course you did, because there's always going to be cheating. Did you make a deal with the devil? Yeah, of course you did. And so you can become president, and Kamala Harris will beam with pride, like just running for president. She's beaming, and she thinks she's made it. You're knee pads Harris, right? You dated a guy who was married, and he gave you 3 jobs, and you gave him lots of jobs, and and they promoted you, and now you latched onto Biden because he said he wanted a woman and an African American woman, and you were the best choice for him because you were also somebody that nobody would think of as being a good replacement for him. So you were insurance policy for him. And then he got senile because, of course he did. He was already senile because he had Parkinson's. And now you find yourself in this position, which is great, right? For you, great. You lucked into it, whatever, your some scars. But it doesn't mean you made it, just like Trump. When Trump was president, it didn't mean he was like most of the people who are politicians, they get these jobs, Congress, a congressman or CEO or whatever you are, you win an Oscar, and you feel good about yourself. It's like it's not you. Like none of those things really matter, right? It's what you are inside, and whether you're getting better, and whether you feel good about yourself, like whether your conscience is bothering you with any of these things. And I've known that for an early age. So my perspective here when I talk about people is about that, right? And all the stuff that they do is like they're chasing something that doesn't exist. Like they think if they win something or they earn something, it's going to make them into something. They're not going to be the piece of shit that everyone says they are. And it makes them more of a piece of shit because they're not trying to be something on the inside. They're trying to get something on the outside to show everyone how successful they are, whether it's money, whether it's some title or degree or whatever it might be, some award or something. Oh, you're an Oscar winner? Yeah. Well, you're a piece of shit too, right? So that's where I'm coming from when I say these things. It's not, I don't care. Like, it doesn't matter to me because, like, for me, I don't care about my own upbringing. When I was in college, there was these Italians called, we used to call them Guidos, who, they would wear a big gold chain and they reeked of cologne and, and they were just whatever they were, right? And I'm a Sicilian and, I have some sort of connection to them. But my friends used to make fun of them, and I guess there's some prejudice or whatever. There's a lot of them in the Connecticut, New York, New Jersey area. These guys who are specifically Guidos. And, I don't feel anything about it, right? I watch the Goodfellas or I watch, something on the Germans or Italians. Like, I don't, there's nothing there. It's not anything to do with me personally. Just because I share some genetic makeup with, like, these people, that doesn't, even my family, like, my family's success or failure or whatever, it's not me. It's not anything to do with me, right? Like, I'm not, I'm a soul just like you are. And how closely I resemble my soul or my characteristics resemble the essence of my, spiritual being is what's important to me. And it should be to everybody else. But most people don't even understand what the fuck I'm talking about. So anyways, let's get into it here. This is Kamala's mom, Shamala Gopalan, right? She was a biomedical science at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. Biomedical scientist, known for progesterone receptor biology and application to breast cancer, right? Her husband was Donald Harris. So she went to the University of California, Berkeley, where she met her husband and then had Kamala. So she was somebody who worked in these universities and these research labs, and she had, an Indian woman, right? And she was, an academic, right? So she's in these, she had money. And her husband, Donald J. Harris, is the father of Kamala Harris. He's a Jamaican-American economist and professor emeritus at Stanford University, right? And so eventually they got divorced, but she grew up in these elitist California, San Francisco area towns, Silicon Valley area. And this was, what they were, Stanford and Berkeley and, these places, right? And, she grew up with money and parents who were highly educated. And so why is she talking like she comes from, like, the streets of Chicago,
You may have noticed. So last week, you may have seen, he pulled out of the debate in September he had previously agreed to.
Boo.
So here's the thing. Here's the funny thing about that. About that. So he won't debate, but he and his running mate sure seem to have a lot to say about me.
Woo, yeah. Say it, sister.
Way, don't you find some of their stuff to just be plain weird?
Woo, yeah, woo.
Well, Donald.
You give that look. Look at the look she gives here. She's sassy.
Well,
Boom. You know, this is all rehearsed. Like, they've gotten rid of her cackle. They won't let her laugh anymore, right? This is, you know, when Joe Biden would say, "Oh, I'm in trouble," right? You know, when he would say something, you know, like they would come and, you know, whatever. But that's like she's being totally coached here to make these smug looks and do this and roll all this stuff out. And later on, I'm editing now, so this is Thursday, August 1st. And, you know, we're going to get more into this in a second here. But she, you know, this is totally performative. Like, this is just this is the new Kamala Harris, right? There's just like one white guy. Is this guy a mannequin, like a J.C. Penney model?
I do hope you'll reconsider to meet me on the debate stage. Because as the saying goes, if you've got something to say, say it to my face.
And they've gotten rid of the cackle. They've told her to tamp down the cackle. And she's laughing, right? And so this is you know, these are paid crowds, right? Like, they're over enthusiastic.
Donald Trump, on the other hand, has been talking a big game about securing our border, but he does not walk the walk. Or as my friend Quavo would say, he does not walk it like he talks it.
Woo! Quavo, woo! Woo! Like, she's very annoying, right? And if you were Trump, you want people to get a big dose of this. Because when people got a big dose of it before, the Democrats got a big dose of it before, they rejected her wholeheartedly. Now, they're not going to do that this time because of the hatred of Trump and, you know, all of it. But the more that she talks and the more she has this fake swagger, again, she comes from academia. She comes from two highly educated parents. And her mom, an Indian mom, will let her talk all kinds of slang and these things. I mean, they're very, you know, big about saving face and all this thing. Her dad's Jamaican. Like, she's not, you know, she doesn't come from some, you know, I mean, she went to an all-black college, but where she grew up in terms of all these things was with, I mean, she probably went to private school, right? Well, she did, and I just had found that out yesterday when I'm editing right here. But this is what I was talking about, right, with all the stuff. You know, you hear me say that. I said that twice because I just, about them getting rid of the cackle, because I noticed it yesterday, and of course, today again. It's really pouring. I don't know if you hear the thunder and lightning out there. Boom. There's just a huge thunder right on cue. I don't know if my mic's picking it up or not. But this thing with Quavo or Quavo, you say Quavo, I say Quavo. And what I didn't know then is they just had a concert. And I'm going to show you this here in a bit, so let me get into that. But they just had a concert. So this is why there's so much enthusiasm in the crowd. And, like, it shows that her campaign is really failing because she hasn't yet won over the black vote. So let's get into that here. Let's talk about first her upbringing. And again, I was doing this while I was talking about her upbringing here in a second and her, you know, her genetic makeup. Trump was out there, you know, just sticking his foot in it, and because he met with black journalists, right? Which we're gonna get into because that's hilarious, and the whole thing is great. So it says this: where did Kamala Harris go to high school? Harris attended a French-speaking primary school in Notre Dame. I don't know what these words are here. Then Face School, and finally Westmont High School in Westmont, Quebec. Graduated in 1981. There, a friend confided to Harris that she had been sexually abused in her home, which was, I'm not even sure where that was, right? And in terms of her college, she went to, after high school, she attended Vanier College in Montreal. So she was in Canada, and then she attended Howard University, which seems bizarre since her dad was Jamaican and her mom was Indian. I mean, she was, saying that she was a historically black person. Well, kind of, right? The Jamaican side, but her dad also was very light-skinned. And so, like the way that she's trying to be right now, of course, they're all fake, right? Trump is really a Democrat. I mean, they're all faking stuff all the time. But, they're her with her swagger and her sassiness, right? And her laugh. And that's going to grate on people. And it, just doesn't play well in the overall electorate. And so what you want to do is get everybody to see that. Like, she's going to have two sides of herself, right? She's going to speak one way to an African American crowd, a different way to the conservative sort of, blue collar white people in Pennsylvania and Michigan, these states like that, right? And you want to bring all that together. I mean, if Trump doesn't debate her, it'll be, just in terms of the entertainment value alone. Okay, so another thing is Kamala married a Jewish man and celebrates Jewish holidays with his kids. I don't think she has any religion herself. I don't think she grew up with a religion. I don't think she knows much about Hindu religion. I don't know if her mom was religious or not. We'll get into that in a moment. But the way that her narrative is that she's an African American woman and that she's campaigning with this sort of sassy, whatever it is, right? And that's not true. Like, that's not factually accurate. So, again, they're all posers, and she's a big poser. I don't think she believes in anything, right? I don't think she has a dogma, not just religious or anything. She believes in Kamala and power, and, same as Trump. They're very similar in that way. There's similarities between all these personality types that seek the presidency.
Kamala Harris is diving into one of the stickiest and fraught foreign policy issues of our time, Israel's war against Hamas.
It's not sticky, it's a genocide. Everybody with a heart and a conscience can say, Jewish people are saying this. Israel's committing a genocide against the Palestinian people. I've showed you the image time and time again. This is the Palestine this is Israel that was promised to the Jewish people, not by God, because God doesn't promise anything. Land it's there for you for a period of time, right? Land ownership is a fake thing, right? Territorial, in the animal kingdom and human beings for years have fought over territory, and you have a nice piece of land, somebody tries to take it from you. Maybe we could evolve to a point where there'd be some shared, whatever it is, right? Enough for everybody, and everybody get, some kind of thing, right? But there's no divine providence that promises you a land. But in the Bible for evangelical Christians and in the Jewish tradition, the Jewish Bible, this is the greater Israel that they claim that God has promised them. And the evangelical Christians and Jewish people believe that this is promised Israel. This is all Israel, right? Part of Egypt, part of Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Syria. And of course, Israel, what we now consider Israel, that's Palestine. And the whole thing was Palestine 1942 or 3 or whatever before the Britain and the UN decided to split it up into Israel. And so they want this land, and they've been encroaching on Palestinian land since the time that there was this partition. And they have done all kinds of, greasy, manipulative, and violent things to the Palestinian people to get them off of what they consider their land. So that's what this is about. It has nothing to do with Hamas or the Palestinian people. It's a genocide so Israel can take this land. And when they get this land, they're going to want all this other land as well. They might realistically decide they can't do that. But if they really believe God promised them this land, then every opportunity they have for getting this land, they're going to take, right? So there's nothing complex about this. It's a genocide, and Israel's taking Palestine from the Palestinian people. And Trump is 100% supportive of it. And Kamala and Joe Biden are 90% supportive of it.
The vice president is sitting down with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu this afternoon, just after his sit down with President Biden. The big question, what stance will Kamala Harris take on Israel, on the war against Hamas? Will she remain in lockstep with Joe Biden's policy or something different? CNN's Isaac Dover has new reporting on all of this, and it's great reporting this morning. Isaac, how big of a test is this for Harris?
Okay, so this was that part, but let's get to this. Is Dougie Fresh here
there on that call.
Let me just make this clear. Vice President Harris has been and will be a strong supporter of Israel as a secure, democratic, and Jewish state, and she will always ensure that Israel can defend itself, period. That's who Kamala Harris is.
That's her husband, Dougie Fresh. And so, he's Jewish and he's saying these things. But she is a little bit less supportive than Trump, but they're both supportive. They both suck on this. Trump is more sucky. So you add to this is Mindy Keeling, the actress. She's, of course, Indian. And Kamala here.
I don't want to suffer the consequences of our future president not liking my Indian food.
Can I just tell you something?
Yeah.
I've never made dosas.
This is from 4 years ago on Kamala's YouTube channel. Look at him come in.
You're coming to the kitchen already. Like you live here.
Coming to the kitchen. That's
this is so nice. Are you stressed for making Indian food?
Oh my God, you do it at a taster's. Oh my, you have no idea. This is how my mother kept all of her stuff.
This is so funny. I told my dad I was like bringing over the stuff from the store. He's like, obviously I put them in taster's choice.
But this literally was how my mother kept all of this stuff.
That's so funny.
What is that?
Do they tell each
I
other?
don't know.
So they have Taster's Choice coffee, and then they put the Indian spices in the jars.
Hi guys, it's Mindy. I'm here in my kitchen, and today we are cooking, but we have a very special guest. Very special. Senator Kamala Harris.
Hi guys.
Wait, so here's...
Hey! She's getting rid of that. They're working on getting rid of that.
Here's what I want to know.
Okay.
Is it respectful to call... Like, I should be calling you Senator Harris, right?
No, you should not. That's not on my birth certificate.
Okay.
Call
Kamala?
Kamala? Yes, please.
Okay, because the Indian in me, I feel like my parents,
Just
my
don't
dad
call
will
me-
watch this.
Just don't call me auntie.
Okay, I won't call you auntie.
That's what the Indians call. So she grew up in an Indian household, right? That's her major. She went to live with her mom when her parents got divorced. Like I did research on her years ago about this stuff. And the Indian culture is very. I love the Indian culture. I mean, I've gone to India numerous times, of course, doing the meditation. But there's things about it that are quite different than American culture. A lot of these cultures where there's a meshment, right, where there's just strong family pressure to support the family and do things for the family and not bring shame on the family and just all the things that go with it. And so, as an American, you don't grow up with that nearly as much, especially now where both parents are working, right? And, she grew up as an Indian person. Like, that would be her strongest influence, right? Because she lived with her mom, and her mom was Indian, right?
They'll be like, how could you call her by her first name? She's worked so hard. Okay, so what we're going to cook today is an Indian recipe.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
you are Indian.
Yes.
Okay, and I don't know that everybody knows that. But I find that wherever I go and I see Indian people at the supermarket, on the street, everyone's like, Kamala Harris is Indian, right? It's like the thing we're so excited about to have you running for president.
Yeah.
So we're both Indian.
Yes.
But actually, we're both South Indian.
Yes. You look like the entire one half of my family.
Okay, so she comes from Tamil, right? They're both Tamilian, right? Because South India's Tamil. So that's the part of India that I'm familiar with. Of course, dosas are part of that culture. I went to Chennai where Master Charji, the third master of the system, was from. And so she is most likely Brahmin. Her mom was highly educated. So she probably came from a wealthy Brahmin family, her mom, right, in India. So Kamala should be Brahmin, which Brahmin people have a tendency towards spirituality, to be educated, to be teachers. And, some of them, I guess, would be politicians, but not like this, right? And so she's broken away from those tendencies. Her dad was a college professor and a guy who was, had intelligent, educated people. And she's kind of a dope and, almost like a party girl, right? Like a drunken
family.
Okay, thank you.
You do.
I've been telling people
You
we're
do.
related already,
Yeah.
so this is perfect. It's basically true. And so, were you raised eating South Indian food?
South Indian food, lots of rice and yogurt, potato curry, dal, lots of dal, idli.
Yes, Italy. That's a deep cut. Okay, so what we're cooking today is two things. One of the South Indian staples is dosa, which is kind of like a sourdough crepe. And then we're going to make a potato curry, which is the traditional accompaniment. So I printed out. So
where did you get this?
So again, like Kamala's embracing her Indian heritage because she wanted Indian votes. Like, Indians will vote for an Indian. It's just like a thing. I mean, there's all cultures will do this, but Indians are big on Kamala Harris. You know, some of the Indians are kind of racist against black people. I mean, even this guy Kamlesh, who runs the defunct Heartfulness spin-off of Saj Marg that I do. Like, he's said things that made me think that he was kind of racist. But, so it's a kind of a conflict. But, just to have an Indian person as president, that, someone at least half Indian, that'd be a big deal for the Indian population in America. And Kamala's cultivating this thing here. So again, I'm editing here. I want to get a couple of these points in that are really essential. And so the first thing is, my mom was Irish Catholic, and my dad talked about his Italian upbringing, but not that much. And I went to see my grandparents in New Jersey, and my grandfather was Sicilian, and the guy was a barber, and he was like 90 years old, and he had to retire, but they would make me get my hair cut by him, and I'd end up bleeding because the guy was like old as fuck, right? But I got some influence from my dad talking about some Sicilian stuff, but not that much. We didn't have that type of food. My mom heavily identified it was Irish, but, it wasn't that much influence. But the Albanian stuff, I didn't get any of that. I didn't know any Albanian people, not till I waited tables when I was in my 20s. And the chef was Albanian. And the sous chef of this restaurant, so there was 2 Albanian people. And they were loving that I was Albanian, or partly. They told me about Albania. I knew nothing about it, right? And the German part, not so much. I mean, I spent a lot of time with my grandfather, like I said. He was like somebody I really enjoyed my time with him. But, there wasn't so much. He didn't talk about Germany. There wasn't like, we didn't eat like Wiener Schnitzels or whatever, So what I'm saying here is, you can grow up in a multicultural family, but only be influenced by part of that culture. And Indian culture is so strong, the family culture, and she, being divorced and being with her mom, who was her primary caretaker. Kamala might have gotten some where she hung out with African-American kids because, whatever. Like, I don't know what her upbringing was like in that way, socially. But in terms of her parental influence, it would have been very heavy in terms of the Indian culture. Like, she's saying stuff here. She ate all that Indian food, and her mom told her all those Indian things, right? And in the Sajmark system, they have arranged marriages, right? And Charji stopped arranging marriages for anybody outside of India. Because people in Europe and America would come and say, can you find me a spouse? And he would, and it almost always ended up in divorce, and they just couldn't do it. But like the Indians, like some girl would stand up and say, Charji, can you find me a husband? And he'd point like, that guy right there, right? And if you were an American, you'd be like, what just happened? That can't be real. And, you'd have a lot of doubts. But, he had problems even with Indian people marrying in different states because the cultures are so heavy there and so prejudiced. Different castes and different states. The parents, there was, I met a couple of different couples whose parents had gotten, both sides of the family got guns, and it's hard to do in India. And they're coming after the other family. And they were very pissed. They didn't do Saj Marg, and they didn't trust Charji and all these things, right? And so arranged marriages in India, for the most part, are always caste-related, and there's an economic aspect to it, and, they're people who the families agree upon, and Charji would arrange marriages that there wasn't that. And he stopped arranging marriages, or even he stopped endorsing couples. Like if an Indian girl or an Indian guy met someone from Europe or America, he said, your marriage won't work because the cultural differences are so large. And he talked about the differences in Indian culture and all the other cultures in the world. And the Indian culture is very heavy and very, in terms of the the pressure there is to identify as Indian. I mean, it's a very strong culture and family oriented and all these things, right? Enmeshment, like I said. And so it's very rare. And Kamala's mom and dad got divorced, right? And so, probably that had a lot to do with it. A Jamaican guy and an Indian girl, your cultures are just so different. And I see this more than ever now. That, no matter how open-minded you are, your lens that we have an American lens. Most of us listening to this or wherever you're from, you have a lens from wherever wherever you come from. And it's hard for you to understand. That's why, the majority of my viewers are American. Like, people just aren't going to be able to understand me. Even, by the way, in terms of the English that I speak. Like, they didn't understand me in India. And so India is a hard culture to, and there's so much cultural pressure, and there's so many like idiosyncratic things that people don't even understand or know about, even are aware of in their own cultures. And, Americans marrying people from other countries doesn't do well either, because Americans have a totally different perspective. And those things always happen and come up, right? And I'm saying this because Kamala is definitely, her biggest influence would be her Indian mom. And, just how much does she talk about Jamaica, right? I've never heard her met with somebody who's Jamaican. So she's American. She has her American influence, and she has her mom, which is Indian. But now she's trying to be like some, streetwise, wisecracking, like this is what I'm getting at this whole thing. And there's other stuff here as I get into it, this stuff with her grandfather being an ardent slave owner. So according to the Los Angeles Times, Kamala's mom, Gopalan, her last name's Gopalan, I know a lot of Gopalans, right, was a Tamil Brahmin, part of a privileged elite in Hindus' ancient caste hierarchy. And so the Brahmins are at the top of in terms of South India, the Brahmin's the best caste. And you guys might have, I've told this story before on my Journey series. So as I was in India, my kids had, a variety of Indian friends, and there was a kid, he was about 25, and me and him had some, conversations, really funny kid. And he and his sister were cool. His dad was an absolute nightmare. I talk about this in the Journey series. We went to stay at his dad's house when we were in the flood. His dad was insisting on us coming to his house. Every time I saw him, he wanted me to bring my family down there, and we ended up down there, and so I called him, and it was an absolute nightmare. His dad was a real prick, but the kid was really funny, nice kid. And they have some sort of, reform system, like the affirmative action program in America for the Indian caste system. And the kid told me that, because he was a Brahmin, and to get some sort of position, I don't know whether it was to get into a school or government, he would have to score like a higher score than was possible on the test, because it was so rigged against Brahmins now, right? Especially in that area in southern India. So he had to pretend he wasn't a Brahmin. He had to pretend he didn't have that caste when he was, doing whatever he was doing, because it was so rigged against him because of the way the Brahmin culture had dominated that area. But Brahmins, for the most part, are gurus, spiritual people, or they're doctors or engineers, educated, professional, academic, sometimes politicians, right? And in the rich southern part of India that I'm familiar with, they are, they're the wealthy people. And I saw some Brahmins who were extraordinarily wealthy, and even in terms of American understanding of wealth, right? And they're, influential in the government and these things, right? Oftentimes they're, scientists. I mean, they're very prevalent in the upper echelon of Indian society, and they're very spiritually oriented, and they have, varieties of different kinds of religious and spiritual, positions and things that they do. And again, I'm familiar with that area. Her mom's from Chennai, which I went to Chennai more than any other part of India. And I was basically living in the Chennai area, or, in Chennai for like almost 3 years. And so I'm well aware, I like the culture, and there's things I love about it. There's things that I don't like about it. Of course, all the stuff that's happened since with the Heartfulness debacle and that turning into a cult and all the things. And the Chennai people, the Brahmins, are against this guy Kamlesh because he was not of that caste, right? He comes from the Gujarati caste that's known for criminality, for being business, like business tycoons that have questionable morals, that are all about making money, right? And are less respected caste, right? But have their own levels of power. But anyways, and of course I'm part Irish. So I have connections with Kamala's upbringing and things like this, all of it. And, I appreciate, I would like to see somebody with Indian descent in the presidency, just as because I have a connection with that culture. But they wouldn't be they wouldn't be the kind of people that I would like, right? They wouldn't be the kind of Brahmin or Indian person I would like because they're running for president, right? Like the people who are really saintly and all these things, are higher developed souls, don't run for political office because they realize it's, they've probably done that in a past life and they're just not into it. They realize you can't change anything through politics. And they realize these are just, power positions and, all of it. You just don't have any taste for it. You don't have any desire for it. If you're an evolved soul who's, embarking on a spiritual quest, because it's just, it's like poison to your spiritual well-being to seek political, it's an earlier stage. You do it, earlier stage in your spiritual development, and then you realize that it's, not good for your connection to your soul, and it's just all material and corrupt and these things. The Indian government is very corrupt, and as is, I'm sure, the Jamaican government. And so her dad came from a rich slave owner who had a town named after him, and whatever Jamaican, ancestry has, like whatever that, however that played out. So I guess the guy was banging his slaves and, that kind of thing. And so, there's that. He obviously has some wealth and he comes from the upper echelon of Jamaican people because he got into Stanford, right? You have this stuff that's called, Master Charge used to refer to the brain drain, like all the great, brilliant minds of India, people who are on the top educational, performance. The really smart people in India, the really, the ones who excel, end up leaving India, and many of them come to America and these other Western countries to make a lot of money. And they don't, maybe they send some money back to their families and they put something back into the Indian culture. But they get educated by the Indian people and they have a lot to offer. Instead, they go to some other country where they can make more money and have a better lifestyle. And so that's what happened here with Kamala's mom and dad. They were people who were smarter and, a part of the elite class of their country, their cultures, right? They come to America and meet. They're part of the elite academic people, the academia people that have their own level of elitism, and they think they're smarter and better than everybody. Her dad was hyper liberal, a Marxist. Her mom must have been similar to that, right? Because she married a guy like that. And so she lived in a very liberal area in, Berkeley, California, the, Silicon Valley area at Stanford, these places. And then she, I guess, lived in Canada for a while, which is hyper liberal. And then she, went to school in Canada and then went to a historical black college. And then all of a sudden became a black person, right? And she's not, certainly she's a person of color. But some of that's from her Indian ancestry, and some of that's from her Jamaican ancestry, which she had, Irish blood as well. And now she's married to a Jewish guy. And, I don't mind multiculturalism, but that's not how they're presenting her. They're mostly pushing her to get as much African-American vote and be like an Obama, to be some sort of female version of Obama. And even Obama wasn't that. Obama came from Hawaii. His mom was white. His dad, he was raised by a guy he was more raised by his stepdad, who was Indonesian. But there's a lot of evidence that Obama's family, his grandparents, his white grandparents were part of the CIA in Hawaii. They have the big, CIA has a big, there's a lot of intelligence community stuff in Hawaii. We know about that from, various things, that Edward Snowden stuff. And there seems to be like he was a CIA operative, being trained even as a young person, as a kid. And so that is whatever it is, right? but his dad was African, like really African, not African American. And so Obama had, was raised in Hawaii by his grandmother was like a banker, these things, right? And so they're not the brand or the image that they are being presented as, which, they never are. So that's it's always the case. But Kamala coming in with some swag and being sassy and these things, right, in the same way Obama was, and she's not that person, right? She's not, the person that they're presented her as. And, she's in a difficult position because they want her to bring the youth vote in, but the youth are overwhelmingly against the genocide that's happening in Israel. And so, it's a mess over there, and I don't see her being able to pull together. She's going to lose some of the Biden voters. There's a lot of laborers, like blue-collar workers in these swing states, these Midwestern swing states, that aren't that comfortable voting for a woman and a person of color. They wouldn't vote for Obama, and maybe they would, but not for a woman, these things. They wouldn't vote for Hillary Clinton. They're more conservative. They didn't like Trump, and Biden, was from Pennsylvania, and he was, he had an in with them, right? And so, the whole thing's an absolute mess. Like Kamala's, whatever this is. I hope there's a debate. There almost has to be one. And they're keeping Joe Biden around. Trump looked kind of weaselly by the way he was talking about the debate. And they must believe, like I said, that they can't lose because, that would be something where if he did some kind of bad debate performance, like Joe Biden did, and he said something offensive or, it was rigged against him like it would be, especially if he went to ABC or some of these other places. The reason CNN was fair when he was talking about Jake Tapper being fair, I'll probably go back and say that when I edit it, so I'm not going to, I'll repeat it here because the reason it was fair because they were doing a hit piece on Joe Biden. So I'll say that again earlier so I won't expand on that. But, that won't happen again against Kamala. Although I think the powers that be want Trump to win. Everything's lining up like that. It's just hard to say. It's just a big mess. It's just a big ass mess. So Kamala Harris is a descendant of an Irish slave owner in Jamaica. Hamilton Brown was paid 11 M. I don't know what that is in terms of money. In compensation by the British government to free slaves after ban. Irish roots are not the way she was likely to embrace. She was the daughter of Donald Harris, who was born in Jamaica, and Shamala Gopalan Harris from India. Genealogical research carried out by Northern Irish historian Stephen McCracken reveals Miss Harris' 4 times parental great-grandfather, Hamilton Brown, was born in Co-Antrim in 1776, the year of the U.S. Declaration of Independence. Brown immigrated to Jamaica, then a British colony, and became an enthusiastic slave owner on the sugar plantations that were the mainstay of the island's economy. He opposed the abolition of slavery across the British Empire in 1832 and went to Antrim to replace his slaves with workers from his native country. He gave his name Brownstown in Jamaica and is buried in he's got a town named after him, interior of St. Mark's Anglican Church, which he built with his own money. Brown was pro-slavery and hated the British abolitionists, William Wilberforce. So these things, right? Brown receives almost $11 million in modern money in compensation, euros, so that's even more than dollars, from the British government for his slaves, according to the records. So he got all this money to set his slaves free, I guess. And so they spent all this money. He was a major person here. And so her dad came from, I would assume, Jamaican wealth. He was a wealthy Jamaican person who comes to America and goes to the very expensive Stanford University. So she came from the elite Brahmin caste in India and a former slave owner, somebody who was among the economic elite in Jamaica. This is their town named after her great-grandfather in Jamaica, Browntown. close to the ocean here. And so, not a very big island. And so she's part slave owner, right? She has slave owner blood in her system, right, from her great-grandfather on her dad's side. And she was an elitist in the Brahmin caste. It says here her father is a renowned Marxist economist from Jamaica who taught at Stanford University. So he's ultra-liberal, right? A Marxist, that's a communist economist. So you get the idea there because she's playing identity politics, as is Trump, because Trump has always wanted to cultivate white voters, and he's pretending to be a Republican and pretending to be a Christian, even though he says he's not a Christian. He's using their lingo, and he's got the evangelicals behind him, right? And so all of this stuff, right? And it was her grandfather 4 times removed. So her great-grandfather, great-great-great-great-grandfather was the slave owner. So, she's got stuff she doesn't want you to know, right? But then there's this. Let me get into this thing here. Okay, so then last night my wife and I were about to eat dinner, and I was watching this. I was waiting for her. And this came on. It was absolutely wonderful. This guy, Ari Meebler, has this young man.
Knows that we're in it together, and we're in it together to win because there's so much at stake, no matter what music you like or what dance moves, we all want our kids to have.
So that's Parker Short, Young Democrats of Georgia president, right? So he's there at this Kamala event. You can see that there's a white guy here, but this is an event where it's in Georgia that Quavo and Megan Thee Stallion are there, which is important.
A better future, and that's why I'm here. And I will say, before I started singing "Not Like Us," I had the same energy for "Brick House" and some Ludacris songs. I was enjoying myself all night. The energy was electric because we're excited.
Parker, as you may know, Ludacris was all.
So here he is here in the corner, right? This one white guy, and
About grassroots organizing, the album "Word of Mouth," right, is how you get the word out.
This guy tries to be. He talked about the Drake beef with and Kendrick Lamar, and while they're waiting for Kamala, they're playing that song, and he was singing it, right? I think I have a little bit of that at the end.
We're going through the pictures of you as well as Kamala up there. I did want to ask you. You're what they used to call, I'm guessing, from what I can gather.
Wait, don't say it, you homophobic MNFer. Don't say it. Don't say it, Ari Meebler.
A yellow dog Democrat.
Oh, I thought you were going somewhere else with this.
Right? Not someone who goes back and forth to the Republicans. So I say that by introduction of...
I'm not a Democrat, so I'm...
So wait, but aren't you in charge of the Young Democrats and you're there with Kamala Harris?
Not a Republican in any way, shape,
right, you're not a Republican. So this is where I'm going with this.
Democrat, you know what I am? I'm somebody who cares about good public policy.
Sure.
There you go.
So here's where I'm going, Parker. Let me ask you a question.
Since I was 15.
I feel like if we caught up with you a month ago, you would be loyal and strong for President Biden. But I did want to ask you, in all honesty, even though we know you support the Democrats, do you see any greater enthusiasm now that it's Harris, or is it too early to tell?
That's like the easiest question you've ever asked me.
This is a great moment. He freezes.
Easy, but we may have frozen. Let's take another look at any of the videos we have. So I'll tell folks, we're just talking to Parker Short. It's tragic sometimes with these kind of interviews. He was saying it's the easiest question I've ever asked.
So the guy is there. Look at him go, right? And look at this woman look at him like, just sit down, white boy. Like, look at him getting all sassy. He's getting all, like, he's over the top. And she's looking at him. And they're rocking. And you're like, well, look at the enthusiasm at a Kamala Harris event. Yeah, because she brought in 2 rap stars. And so why is she so desperate to win over the black vote? Like, why isn't she appealing to other demographics, right? The difference makers are going to be these Midwestern states of Minnesota and Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and possibly Ohio, right? And of course, Florida. But they have these swing states, and Trump's going to win Florida. So you have these swing states that are, the people that like Joe Biden, the reason they pushed Joe Biden is he had a Republican appeal, that no malarkey, growing up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, these white people. There's white people that would vote for Joe Biden that aren't going to vote for Kamala Harris. And when they see her pushing these rap stars and, someone like Megan Thee Stallion and these things, which is going to be used against her, that she's going to have trouble getting those people who voted for Joe Biden. Older white people who are blue-collar people, workers, and they didn't, weren't in love with Hillary Clinton. And Hillary Clinton couldn't win the black vote, and, she couldn't get as many blue-collar people like Joe Biden, right, white people. And so that's the demographic they're really both targeting, Trump and Biden were. And so Kamala Harris, to show she has enthusiasm, she has to bring in rap stars. And so you have this little white kid, and this, the thing's rocking here, but they're not rocking because Kamala Harris. They're rocking because they got basically a free concert. Like, this is this is what's happening. This is what's up, right? And so she doesn't even have the black vote. Like, Kamala Harris certainly is going to have to struggle with the independents and Republicans and blue collar Democrats in these states that are swing states that Trump has won in 2016 and split with Biden in 2020 and is going to win back because of the Biden economy, which she is a part of. And they're going to have a problem voting for a woman and a black woman because they're white semi-racist people or whatever they are, right? And maybe they voted for Obama or maybe they didn't, but they're going to have trouble voting for Kamala. But she's not even going after those people, the swing state. Her initial tour is various black, she's pandering to black people, so she doesn't even have their vote. Like, she's trying to win them over, right? Like, well, that's not going to win you the election. You should have that already. I mean, Trump is considered a racist and, whatever. He's a Republican and, like, you should have the black vote already. You should be going after some other demographics. She's also going after young people here with this stuff, Kendrick Lamar and this other stuff they're playing. But, this is what's happening.
Let's bring out the former president of the United States, the Republican nominee for president, former President Donald Trump.
Okay, so there's no applause, right? Trump's big thing is he loves to be loved. And he can't handle anybody criticize him, and, we know this. He turns on people even if they don't criticize him, but if they do, he turns on them. He can't take the slightest bit of criticism. And he's used to these big crowds that adore him. And that's his big thing. I think it's that adoration at these rallies is as big of a thing for him as anything else. Going to rallies and having thousands of people just lap up whatever he's saying. And so that didn't happen here. And his handlers know that. If I know this, his handlers, everyone around him knows this, right? And that she was going to be what Trump calls nasty. Trump says, you're so nasty, right? So this is what she's going to be here. That's how he's going to interpret it. And it's going to be a half hour of Trump being like triggered Trump, right? There's nothing worse than trigger Trump. And if he's a shoo-in to win the election, he's doing this to get black vote, which he's not going to get with Kamala Harris. Like, it's a silly thing to be going after, right? Especially here. These are, people who are, they're journalists, so they're mainstream media. They believe the mainstream stories. These aren't, there's plenty of, groups, black groups out there that are truther groups in one way or another. Like, he could go and talk to them that don't buy into the mainstream narrative. But he didn't, right? He decided to go to people who are as mainstream as the media because they're part of the media, which is, like, silly.
Mr. President, we so appreciate you giving us an hour of your time. I want to start by addressing
It ends up being like 39 minutes.
the elephant in the room, sir. A lot of people did not think it was appropriate for you to be here today. You have pushed false claims about some of your rivals, from Nikki Haley to former President Barack Obama, saying that they were not born in the United States, which is not true. You have told 4 congresswomen of color.
See, that narrative, which is not racist, you know, the Barack Obama thing wasn't a racist narrative. There was a birth certificate out there that had been photoshopped, right? And he, you know, he had trouble producing the thing, you know, which was, you know, there was controversy because he lived in, and I get into this, you know, where he lived in Indonesia and his dad was African, right? And then he grew up in Hawaii where there's a lot of CIA activity. And it seems like his grandparents, his white grandparents, were CIA, you know, so there's that. Well, like, there's deeper levels of understanding of these things, right? And I just don't care about any of it anymore, just whatever. Like, I can't prove any of it, and I don't need to prove it to myself. And, you know, to know that the system is completely corrupted and you know, deceptive. Like, I don't need to prove it anymore because I know that they're lying to me all the time, right? Like, you know, everything's a lie. And, you know, material life in itself is a lie, you know, Maya, from the Sanskrit, you know, illusion. But, like, he's coming in and she's coming in hot, and, like, nobody in the Trump campaign knew that she was going to be like this. Of course they did. Are they sabotaging him? Because why would they do this, right? And they know what he's going to react, because we know what he's going to react like when you ask him questions like this.
Who were American citizens to go back to where they came from. You have used words like animal and rabid to describe black district attorneys. You've attacked black journalists, calling them a loser, saying the questions that they ask are, quote, stupid and racist. You've had dinner with a white supremacist at your Mar-a-Lago resort. So my question, sir, now that you are asking black supporters to vote for you, why should black voters trust you after you have used language like that?
Well, first of all, I don't think I've ever been asked a question so in such a horrible manner. First question.
like nobody saw this coming, right? You know, they're playing this over and over again on CNN and MSNBC and, you know, and all these places.
Don't even say hello, how are you? Are you with ABC? Because I think they're a fake news network, a terrible network. And I think it's disgraceful that I came here in good spirit. I love the black population of this country. I've done so much for the black population of this country, including employment, including opportunity zones with Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, which is one of the greatest programs ever for black workers and black entrepreneurs. I've done so much, and, you know, and I say this, historically, black colleges and universities were out of money. They were stone cold broke, and I saved them, and I gave them long-term financing, and nobody else was doing it. I think it's a very rude introduction. I don't know exactly why you would do something like that. And let me go a step further. I was invited here, and I was told my opponent, whether it was Biden or Kamala, I was told my opponent was going to be here. It turned out my opponent isn't here. You invited me under false pretense. And then you said, you can't do it with Zoom. Well, you know, where's Zoom? She's going to do it with Zoom, and she's not coming. And then you were half an hour late. Just so we understand, I have too much respect for you to be late. They couldn't get their equipment working, or something was wrong.
Mr. President, I would love
Who's they?
I think it's a very nasty question. I have answered the question. I have been the best president for the black population since Abraham Lincoln. That's my answer.
Better than President Johnson, who signed the Voting Rights Act?
And for you to start off a question and answer period, especially when you're 35 minutes late because you couldn't get your equipment to work, in such a hostile manner, I think it's a disgrace. I really do.
Let me just ask.
One of these Trumpers tweeted, Trump just put her in her place, which, again, is a problem for Trumpers, because he's not going there for you. Like, you guys are already voting for him, right? He's going there because he thought he was he's making inroads into the black community, and maybe he'll, you know, still have some, some people who used to be voting for Biden switching over to voting for him, but this isn't going to help him, right?
follow-up, sir, and then we'll move on to other questions here. Some of your own supporters, including Republicans on Capitol Hill, have labeled Vice President Kamala Harris, who is the first Black and Asian American woman to serve as vice president and be on a major party ticket, as a DEI hire. Is that acceptable language to you? And will you tell those Republicans and those supporters to stop it?
How do you define DEI? Go ahead. How do you define
diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
So you didn't even know that. Like, Trump didn't even know what she's talking about. I didn't either, but I knew it was going to be something like that, just from the context of the word. And so, these other people are saying that Trump doesn't even know what she's talking about here.
Is that what your definition?
That is
give me a
literally
definition
the words
then. Would you give me a definition
DEI.
of that? Give me a definition of
Sir,
that.
I'm asking you a question,
No,
a
you
very
have to
direct
define
question.
it. Define it for me, if you would.
I just defined it, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a Black woman?
Well, I can say no. I think it's maybe.
What are you talking about? So, first of all, this is a huge thing for Trump to do, right? Just stupid. Especially, so soon after his traumatic imaginary bullet missed his ear, or hit his ear and, left no damage. But Joe Biden defined her as that. Joe Biden came out and said that he was going to have a woman as a vice president. And then all the people of color say, hey, we're your main support system. Like he was saved in South Carolina by Black people in the, with the guy, whatever that senator's name is, Clyburn. And so, he lost the New Hampshire and Iowa primaries, which is white people primaries, right, where there's a low population of Black people. And Joe Biden's campaign, he was 4th and 5th in Iowa and New Hampshire. And he had been the front runner the whole way, and then all of a sudden his campaign was dying. He had the no malarkey crap that he was pushing out there. He went to South Carolina, and Clyburn goes, I'll save you here. But you got to get your shit together. You got to get rid of this no malarkey crap and, actually campaign. And so Clyburn got the high population of Black people in South Carolina to vote for Biden. And he carried the state, so he won a primary, and then they rigged it for him after that, right? Because they didn't want Bernie Sanders. And so they then now go to him and go, well, if you want a woman, why not a woman of color? So then Biden commits to that he was going to get a woman and woman of color. He did this publicly. He said, my vice president will be a woman of color. Will be an African-American woman. And so the options were there, and he chose Kamala. And the options weren't, there wasn't like Stacey Abrams was somebody that was talked about. But he himself said, just like he said he was going to put the first African-American woman on the Supreme Court. And so that is a diversity and equity hire. Like that was, not that these are people who are part of the system, are given a green light, right? They've been given a, they're part of the beastly system, just like all the other potential candidates. So yeah, there's that. So they have qualifications. But he specifically said he was going to run with a Black woman, a woman of color, and then that's what happened. So, what are you talking about? That's the truth of it. He handpicked, he said he was going to pick somebody of these demographics, a woman and a woman of color, right? So these were the things that were her defining characteristics that got her the position of vice president.
A little bit different. So I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly very much. And she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was Black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn Black, and now she wants to be known as Black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she Black?
She is always identified as a Black woman. She went to a historically Black college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't, because she was Indian all the way.
Well, she went to Canadian high school and Canadian college before going to a historically Black college. So she was, she lived in, she's part Canadian, other than being Irish and Jamaican and being Indian, and then married a Jewish guy. So yeah, she tries to do that now. But bizarrely, she's not popping in the Black community, which I'll talk about in a second here.
And then all of a sudden she made a turn, and she became a black person.
Just to be clear, sir, do
And
you
I
believe
think,
that
I think
she is
somebody should look into that too when you ask continue in a very hostile, nasty tone.
It's a direct question.
Nasty. And the word nasty was coming out. All right, so let's go see Kamala's reaction to this. You've already seen what I've covered, like which would be, you know, a more accurate assessment of this whole thing. Like Trump, he butchered it there. Like it's just stupid what he said. Not the way that I said it, right? Because she never identified as Indian. Kamala was never an Indian person because she was in San Francisco. She wasn't looking for the Indian vote. She never did that. That never happened. Like, as far as I know, she never, you know, other than in, you know, small things like with Mindy Keeling, where she's trying to get, you know, the small, Indians have a small percentage of the vote. It's like 1 or 2% East Indian people, right? People from India. And I think there's, what is it, 12% are African Americans. That's the, you know, that's that demographic, right? This is what we're talking about with these demographics. The, you know, something like 70%, 68% is white, and 18% is Hispanic, and like let's look at the demographics here. So this is of 2018. It's actually more than 60% are white, 18% Hispanic, 13% are black, 6% are Asian, and green is multiracial, which is 2%. But of kids, it's only 50% are white, 25% are Hispanic, 14% are black, 5% are Asian, and 4% multiracial and things. So you see the difference. And eventually there'll be no, white people won't have a majority anymore. And they're already pushing for that. There's 4.8 million Asian Americans in the U.S., making about 1.35% of the total population. And some of those people, I think that's maybe citizens. So people who are on visas, work visas and things. Maybe let's say it's 2%, right? And so you're not going to get elected on that 2%. But that 2% will vote for you, like I said, because they're very ethnocentric. And so she'll get the support of the Indian people, you know, and some of them are racist. So, you know, who knows, right? But that's not enough to carry her. So she never pushed herself out as an Indian person. She always pushed herself out. She labeled herself in terms of being a political figure as a black person. And so Trump is just making shit up, right? Like he does, which is stupid. And like he went there in a way that isn't, you know, what I was talking about is that she's fake, that she pretends to be a, you know, like a black person from the streets, you know, identifying from, you know, lower income. And she's from the elite class, right? She's from the elite class of Jamaican former slave owner who was a, you know, a millionaire in his time, right? A great grandfather who was Irish, and a father was Jamaican, and a mother was in the elite Brahmin caste and was obviously came from money, and they were academic elites as well, right? Going to Stanford University, these elitist California University, and being in Canada, hyper liberal. Her dad was a Marxist communist, right? These, you know, she's an elite liberal type of person who isn't going to get elected, right? Like she's really more of a Bernie Sanders, but she wants to be more of a Joe Biden, right? Centrist, somebody can, you know, go navigate all these different things. But what's interesting is she's not even winning the black population, the black vote, because that's who she's going after right off the bat, right? So again, here's Kamala Harris. She's talking with this Barack Obama sort of accent, right? Which, you know, sometimes you hear white people do this, right? Like where they're trying to fit into, you know, a black sort of whatever it is, right? Where they're trying to talk what they consider black people talk like. So back when I played basketball, there's a guy in my YMCA team. This is back in college, you know, so he, in Connecticut. And he lived in Bridgeport, which is a very tough town, gang-oriented, just close to New York. You know, just a lot of crime, projects there. And it's a part of Fairfield County, which is an ultra-rich. Fairfield is right next to Bridgeport. In Fairfield, it's one of the highest per capita Gold Coast kind of rich people from New York that live there. And when he was trying to be like tough, so he's a blonde guy. He was from his from Poland, like Polish ancestry. And he loved the European bands. Remember the new wave European bands, and he had spiked hair, and he was like into that stuff. And he did like male model stuff. And when he wanted to be tough, he'd tell people, "I'm from Bridgeport, baby," right? And like he'd talk like that. And then when he was talking to somebody who was, whatever, more business or more establishment, he'd be like, "I'm from Fairfield County," right? So like, negotiating these two different things, we used to make fun of him because of it, right? But people do this where they have their different voices for the different demographics, their, whatever it might be. And that's what she's doing here. And it's, it's just really fake. And she's an elite person. And here it is.
It is so good to be with you this evening, and I say that as a proud member of the Divine Nine. And when I look out at everyone here, I see family. And we share a vision for the future of our nation. Ours is a vision of a future in which we realize the promise of America. And aren't so many of us empirical evidence of the promise of America? A promise of freedom, opportunity, and justice, not for some, but for all. Since 1922, the members of Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated have helped realize that promise.
So she's talking to a historic black sorority. And I'm going to show you where she was at an event with Quavo, who she is a Quavo, I think Quavo, who she referenced and quoted earlier in this video, a rapper, I think it's Quavo. That's confusing, so I'm editing here. I showed you the thing from Quavo already because I did that yesterday. And now we know a lot more about all this stuff today, which is Thursday, August 1st. But, she had that thing with Quavo, or Quavo, and Megan Thee Stallion, who made that video with Cardi B, that song called Wet Ass P-Word, right? Which is, so derogatory toward women and just, all of it. And just stuff that young girls shouldn't be listening to. And that was in Georgia. And I'm going to show you a clip from that. And so this means that her campaign is focusing on African Americans first and foremost, which she should already have, because Joe Biden had a high turnout of African American vote and maybe lost a little bit because of his failures and his inflation and things. But that was his biggest demographic. He bragged about it, right? There's that clip I've showed you over and over again. Well, let's show that clip of Kamala here. Let's go to it here.
I wanted to return back to this issue of black voters. I have a lifetime of experience with black voters. I've been one since I was 18. Nobody on this stage should need a focus group to hear from African American voters. Black voters are pissed off, and they're worried. They're pissed off because the only time our issues seem to be really paid attention to by politicians is when people are looking for their vote. And they're worried because the Democratic Party, we don't want to see people miss this opportunity and lose because we are nominating someone.
Okay, so the reason why they think, this is going into this debate, the reason why everyone thinks Hillary Clinton lost at this point in 2019 or 20, whenever this debate was, 2020, was that she couldn't bring in the black vote that Barack Obama brought in. Again, 12% of the population, and and more so now. And Joe Biden was winning the black vote, which was bizarre because he came out of the Obama coalition, which he's going to talk about here. But Cory Booker and Kamala's about to withdraw. She popped for a little bit, and then people got a whiff of her, and they didn't like her, Democrats, and and he's going to withdraw. Neither Cory Booker or Kamala Harris received one vote. Like Cory Booker didn't make it to the primaries either, right? And so there are two black people who can't believe they're losing the black vote to this senile MNFer, this no malarkey MNFer, right? They can't believe it. Like this old white guy who said racist stuff in the past and has these gaffes out there and is clearly senile is getting more support from the black community than they are. And so this is playing out now, right? Bizarrely enough.
one that isn't trusted, doesn't have authentic connection. And so that's what's on the ballot, and issues do matter. I have a lot of respect.
Kamala said, yes, they do.
For the vice president. He has sworn me into my office as a hero. This week I hear him literally say that I don't think we should legalize marijuana. I thought you might have been high when you said it. and let me tell you, because marijuana in our country is already legal for privileged people. And it's
Cory Booker, I'm not going to show you this, but it's hilarious. But this video is going to be like 4 hours long. But he had an imaginary friend named T-Bone. And, of course, he had an imaginary friend named Corn Pop, right? Both tough, gang guys, right? Black gang guys that don't exist, right?
The war on drugs has been a war on black and brown people. And so let me just say this. With more African Americans under criminal supervision in America than all the slaves since 1850, do not roll up into communities and not talk directly to issues that are going to relate to the liberation of children, because there are people in Congress right now that admit to smoking marijuana, while there are people, our kids are in jail right now for those drug crimes. And so these are the kind of issues that mean a lot to our community, and if we don't have somebody authentically, we lost the last election. Let me just give you this data example. We lost in Wisconsin because of a massive diminution, a lot of reasons, but there was a massive diminution in the African-American vote.
So he's talking about Hillary Clinton, that she didn't appeal to black people. So that's a big part of the Democratic idea here, that we have to bring in the black vote, the way Obama did, because it put them over the top, right? The enthusiasm as well, right?
We need to have someone that can inspire, as Kamala said, to inspire African Americans to the polls at record numbers.
Thank you, Senator Booker. Vice President Biden, you can respond to that.
I'll be very brief. Number one, I think we should decriminalize marijuana, period. And I think anyone who has a record should be let out of jail, their records expunged, it be complete.
He didn't do that. So we know that didn't happen.
Zeroed out. But
Kamala Harris was one of the worst. She threw in black people for marijuana crimes. Like, she was really like almost, would be considered almost racist the way that she did that against black, black pot users.
I do think it makes sense, based on data, that we should study what the long-term effects are for the use of marijuana. That's all it is. Number one, everybody gets out, record expunged. Secondly, I'm part of that Obama coalition. I come out of the black community in terms of my support. If you notice, I have more people supporting me in the black community that have announced for me because they know me. They know who I am. 3 former chairs of the Black Caucus, the only African-American woman that ever been elected to the United States Senate, a whole range of people.
No,
my point is,
that's not true. The other one is here.
And this is senile Joe Biden, right? This is Parkinson's.
The first African-American elected. First African-American. So my point is that one of the reasons I was picked to be vice president was because
he's doing the Kamala laugh, right? That really pisses people off. But that was that, right? And, this was them not believing that Joe Biden had more appeal in the African-American, this old white guy had more appeal in the African-American community than either Cory Booker or Kamala. Like, they were getting no support, which was, stunning to them. Like, that's why, and he's senile. They like, this guy's senile. He's a front runner, and nobody could understand why. I mean, that's how these debates went. It was like there's this one guy who didn't get what was going on because he was too far gone, and he was the guy who was winning. And he couldn't believe it. So this is the CNN hit piece where they're talking about Biden's gaffes, right? And this is where Biden talks with this, trying to get street cred, I would call it, accent.
Variety, it's raising questions about appropriate behavior for someone eyeing the White House.
That was the gaffe.
American audience about Mitt Romney in 2012.
They're going to put you all back in chains.
He's going to put you all back in chains, right? Where's that accent? What's that accent, Joe? Where'd you get that accent, right? That's the accent that Kamala Harris is using, right? And, just trying to get street cred. we'll see how this plays out. But the African American community, which was a little bit more down on Biden this time, like he didn't have the support he had the first time, and they might not like Kamala, right? Again, person by person, but more so than that you would think. That's why she's got to go to all these, these crowds, these areas where she's targeting black people. That's what she's doing now. Like, she's got to win them over, and then all these other people. And there's lots of people that aren't going to like her, different demographics. So I think this thing's already over. I think Trump already knows this. It doesn't explain his stupid decision here. But I think this is, I think they're making this sound a lot closer than it actually is.
What those 4 years were like. And today, we were given yet another reminder. This afternoon, Donald Trump spoke at the annual meeting of the National Association of Black Journalists. And it was the same old show. The divisiveness and the disrespect. And let me just say...
See, what he said wasn't disrespectful, or it is divisive, but that was his goal, but it wasn't disrespectful. Because, some of it was deceptive, because she never tried to define herself as an Indian person. In fact, she hid that, right? Her name is Kamala, which is an Indian name, and she was raised primarily by her mother, which I talked about earlier, who was a Brahmin Indian woman from Tamil Nadu, right, from that part of the, India. And so she's in this, elite caste. But she tried to have swagger, but that's not how she grew up, right? Maybe she had some influence from the black community, but again, her dad's Jamaican, right? Her dad probably he definitely spoke with a Jamaican accent. And so she's, and she grew up in these suburbs, like of Berkeley. She wasn't growing up in poverty in the inner city, which she tries to have this sort of street cred, right? And so Trump alluded to that in a very, he did it in the worst possible way. But it's not, it's divisive but not racist because it's true. Some of it's true, right? It's, at least he's, the basis of what he's saying is true. That she's, pretending to be something she's not, right?
The American people deserve better. The American people deserve better. The American people deserve a leader who tells the truth, a leader who does not respond with hostility and anger when confronted with the facts.
Again, these are mainstream media facts. This is what I've always said, that those of us in the truth community, and it's, let's say it's 50 to 60% of the people have views of alternative ideas that are out there, right? Like, that's why they've tried to suppress all the truther stuff. Not that everyone agrees with it, but we have one thing in common is we don't believe the official story. 60 to 70% of people know the media lies to them and believes that Congress and politicians lie to them, right? So it's an overwhelming majority of people. And we all know that. Like, we all are aware of that, right? And so, that we're being lied to. And we might not have the actual factual, the real story, the reality, but we do know we're being lied to. And so the official story has been debunked over and over again, and we don't believe in it, the majority of American people, right? Like 70% said that Joe Biden is too far gone, he's too old and has some kind of, cognitive issues to be president, and he's still president. And Kamala said he was fine, and he's alert, he's great in meetings, which is an out-and-out lie. Cover-up, right? And she should be held accountable for that. But she isn't, because the media's not doing that. And so that's like another deception here, right? But she doesn't have anything to say about what Trump said, because she has a speech she was given. I'm assuming she has some sort of teleprompter, and she doesn't have anything. Like, she should have some kind of, she's just talking very vaguely about what Trump said.
We deserve a leader who understands that our differences do not divide us. They are an essential source of our strength. So I say to Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated, ours is a fight for the future. And it is a fight for freedom. Across our
So she doesn't talk about anything. She sucks at this, right? Like, she should have been able to slam Trump on specifics, but she didn't. And what Trump was basically saying is that she's a fraud. Which you could say is the same thing about Trump, because Trump is pretending to be a Republican, just like she's pretending that she came from some African-American background, and she's like the rest of the black people here, which she's not. She's very unique. An Irish slave owner from Jamaica with a Jamaican father and an East Indian mother. Like, that's a very rare combination. Perfect. I don't think there are probably, I don't know how many people in America you think, or worldwide, have a Jamaican father and an East Indian mom, right? Like, there's not that many Jamaican people, first of all. Jamaica's a small island, right? And so there isn't a lot of African and Indian marriages between African people and Indian people, unless you go to like South Africa or something like that. There's a high population of Indian people in South Africa and black people, people of, African people. But in terms of Jamaican, she's a Jamaican woman, half Jamaican, half East Indian, and a third Irish. She's probably maybe the only person with that genetic makeup, right? And her siblings. And she's trying to have street cred and elitist, right? People who are academic people who are, dad's a Marxist, very liberal, California-ish, California person, and Canadian. She spent time in Canada and California, right? All these things. So you understand the level of amateur hour here. There's no way Trump should be here because this has no political benefit for him. And they're still talking about this today on CNN and MSNBC, although there's been an assassination of the so-called Hamas leader in Iran, which means that Israel has now done an active war in Iran. So that's all happening, right? I mean, there's real stuff happening. But this dope shouldn't have gone on this show. But Kamala Harris is, out there trying to win over a demographic that she already should have won over. And so what Trump is saying here, although he butchered it and said it poorly, is actually a real thing. She may not be as popular, and we already knew that from 2020, that she doesn't get as much of the black vote out as Joe Biden, which is unthinkable, right? I mean, as bad as Kamala Harris is, Joe Biden was straight up old guy racist, like Trump, right? Joe Biden said racist things the same way that Trump did. Just old white guy, that grew up with a certain attitude towards black people. So the whole thing is amateur hour.
Question, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is a DEI hire, as some Republicans
really don't
have said?
know. I mean, I really don't know. Could be. There are some, and there are plenty. I know this lady right over there, Harris, is a fantastic person who just interviewed me at length, and we had a great
look at her. She's so upset.
interview, I think, and I heard you got very good ratings on that.
Well, you
interview.
told me it was the longest one of your life, so we had a good discussion. Look,
She's from Fox.
I want to talk about why you're here today. I mean, it is not lost on us how divided we are as a country. And as you were coming today, we really got to see that we are divided along the lines of race, along the lines of gender. And there is this question of, in this moment where we are, why come here? What is your message today?
My message is to stop people from invading our country that are taking, frankly, a lot of problems with it. But one of the big problems, and a lot of the journalists in this room I know and I have great respect for, a lot of the journalists in this room are black. I will tell you that coming...
All of them are black. And so they're laughing,
Coming from the border are millions and millions of people that happen to be taking black jobs. You had the best...
See, no one's told him that the black job thing is kind of a derogatory term. But there is some truth to this idea that there's a replacement population. Because, there's this idea that the Democrats, the whole thing with BLM, Black Lives Matter, and Antifa and these riots and the George Floyd stuff was, and some of these boycotts and the stuff like they're posting no hate and end racism on NFL jerseys and the stuff with the NBA and all these things. That the problem with police violence and, police have targeted black people. Like, I know that because I've talked to cops who have admitted that they cops profile people, not just black people, but everybody. But some of the role of the police is to keep impoverished people, not just black people, but poor white rednecks and Hispanics and other people, who are, whatever, trailer park people, ghetto people, right? Public housing people, poor people, away from rich people, right? That's a part of what the police is there for. The police is there to divide, the people the haves from the have-nots, right? To protect the haves from the have-nots. And there is this idea that finally there's going to be justice and, this idea of reparations, and none of that stuff's going to happen because the people who run the system know that they have to depopulate. There has to be a reduction in population. And immigrants come in and they're always hungrier. My family came from immigrants, right? My grandfather came over from Germany, his family. My grandmother came over from Ireland. She was an orphan. I'm not sure exactly. Her parents came over, they died, or I should know that story, but I don't. And my grandfather came over from Sicily when he was 16. My dad's dad, my grandfather. And my grandmother came over from Albania, right? And these people coming into America are usually coming from horrible places, and so their work ethic and their attitude is a lot better than people who grow up in America and are entitled. And so that's the idea of a replacement population. You have hard workers coming in, desperate, people leaving horrible situations, and they're willing to do the work. Even the brain drain jobs like the, Indians that come here, the East Indians that come here. I talked about these, academics, doctors, and engineers. They'll work harder and they'll get calls at 4 a.m. and go in. I mean, I know these people. I know some of the East Indians that came over with real cushy jobs. They get paid a lot of money, but they have a visa. They have a work visa, so they have to keep that job to stay in America. They've bought property here. They're not American citizens yet. And there's people who come over with PhDs, and they have to, they are slaves to the corporation that they work for, and they'll work way higher than the American people that get hired, right? And they'll do math, right? I was talking to one of my friend, I think he was from Korea. He was from Korea. I think it was him. This might be somebody, but he was an Asian guy. And I said, why are Asians better at, the Americans in math? And he goes, because, Americans don't want to do math. Like American kids don't want to do math, right? Because they're entitled. And so this idea of a replacement population, well, they're not going to give the black community what the black community is now thinking they might get. Reparations and respect and these things. They're using these things to divide people. The Antifa and Black Lives Matter. But they're going to reduce the population. They're taking from everybody. They're not in the giving mood, right? Things aren't going to get better. You're not going to get a better deal. The people I call the controllers, they're not going to give you more. They don't have it to give you, right? They're going to get rid of Social Security, and they're going to give you less of a lifestyle. That's the Agenda 30. There's all these ideas that you think that there's some kind of division, and they're going to give more from the white community to the black community, or they're going to, whatever it is, they're not going to give to anybody. They're taking right now. They're taking things and they're reducing the population. That's all what's going on, because the system is unsustainable. And so they're going to take everybody's lifestyle, poor, rich, black, white, women, men, gay, straight, all these things. They're taking it from everybody. There's no sense of, well, we're going to take from this group and give to you. That ain't happening. There's nothing to give, right? They're asked out. They have no money. They're broke. When an immigrant population comes in that's coming from a worse situation to a better situation, they're always going to work harder than the entitled people of that country, especially here in America. And so the idea of a replacement population in that sense has some merit, right?
What exactly is a black job, sir?
A black job is anybody that has a job. That's what it is. Anybody that has a job.
All right.
That's black.
And
Mr. President,
they're taking the employment away from black people. They're coming in, they're invading. It's an invasion of millions of people, probably 15, 16, 17 million people. I have a feeling it's much more than that. And everybody's been seeing what's happened. The first group of people, the black population, is affected most by that. And Kamala is allowing it to happen. She's the border czar. She's the worst border czar in the history of the world. There's never been a border czar like this. She's never even essentially been. She said she was there once, but not the right part of the border. So she was a border czar.
This is why he came here. Like, this is his message. It makes sense to get this out, but they're not going to play this, right? See, we live in a world of sound bites. CNN and MSNBC and these other major liberal news outlets don't cover Trump, but they go to all of his events looking for a few sound bites they can play to fit the narrative. And Trump always gives them that, right? And this is even worse because it's, these black journalists, and he should know that they're journalists, they're mainstream, like I said earlier. And so as soon as he says something that fits the narrative, that's going to be covered. The rest of his talking points are not, right? And so even if the talking points have some legitimacy to them or they're good talking points, it doesn't matter.
He's done a horrible job. These people are coming into our country and they're taking black jobs and Hispanic jobs, and frankly, they're taking union jobs. Unions are being very badly affected by all of the millions of people that are pouring into our country. And one thing, as we discussed, many of these people are coming in from mental institutions, from prisons, from jails. They're gang members in other countries. Other countries are setting loose their prisoners. They're opening up their prisons and their mental institutions, and they're taking their bad people, drug dealers, gang members, and they're bringing them into the United States. And by the way, their crime rate is going down, and our crime rate is going to be a disaster.
Mr. President, I want to get into how you...
Everybody's concerned about this. The immigration, like we heard that guy in my last video, that black guy talking about it. Every demographic's concerned about this, the immigration problem, right? And for those reasons. And, Trump sabotaged some of the legislation. Like, it isn't, because he knew this would be a good issue to hammer Trump, to hammer Biden on, and now Harris. So it isn't like he's using this politically, right? Because they could have passed more aggressive legislation that came from that senator in Oklahoma, who was a Republican. But Trump had the Republicans sabotage that so Biden wouldn't have a win, and so he could campaign against him, right? So this is, he doesn't have a problem with immigration. He's just using it as a weapon, right? Because he's fake. Trump's fake. Like, they're all fake.
Address some of the issues with black communities. And I say that plural because we live in communities of color that are different. We're not all the same. We don't vote the same. We don't think the same. It's not monolithic. So as you come here today, I want to talk about something...
Which is a valid point, right? Because that's, what I would say about, Kamala Harris. Like, she's trying to be stereotypically black, right? Like, but there's various, like what people think about black people in terms of the media profile. But there's plenty of black people live in suburbs. There's plenty of black people with PhDs and, whatever it is, right? Just like with, any population, there's the stereotypes and there's how they're viewed. But there are people like Kamala Harris who grew up in, she grew up in private schools, and she's an elitist, right? Kamala Harris comes from an elite family, family with money. And when you grow up with that kind of family, it's different. When you grow up in a highly educated family, you grow up in a family that's, lives in, the sort of the rich liberal area, around Berkeley or these schools and Stanford and things in California, a college town. You grow up in a college town as opposed to, the inner city. You're going to be a different person, right?
That bursts, and this is the weight of the inflation on this country right now. The nonprofit Money Management International recently released data from its mid-year analysis that we have found a 52% rise in people who are seeking counseling for being in credit debt. They're paying for food that is sky high on their credit cards, and now they can't pay that off. The credit counseling nonprofit MMI, as I said, is saying now that they've seen surges that they haven't seen since we were in a pandemic of people in...
She's putting this stuff on a T for Trump because she's a Fox News pro-Trump reporter, right? She's that woman on that show, The Five or whatever it is.
Financial trouble. Much of that falls on the shoulders of single moms, single black moms, when you look statistically.
Yeah.
How do you turn it around? What's your plan for the black community when it comes to money?
So, first of all, it's very hard to hear you for whatever reason because of the fact that they have bad equipment, because I guess, you know, this one...
He just can't help being a dick. He just can't not be a dick, right? Like, he just can't do it.
Woman was unable to get the right equipment. But it's very hard for me to hear you, but I can hear every other word. It's very difficult, actually. But so I don't know if they can fix it.
Maybe it's your hearing. Like, you know, now you're the old guy, right? You know, before Biden was obviously the old guy, but now Kamala Harris is substantially younger than him. He's the old guy, and, you know, they want him to do old guy things like this interview.
Or do something with it, but I'll do the best I can with it. The inflation is absolutely destroying our middle class, our working class, virtually every class. Inflation is a disaster in our country. Inflation is a country buster. It breaks every country. And we had, in my opinion, the worst inflation we've had. They say it's 58 years, but I think it's much more than that. It's been devastating. And if you just take a look at a lot of things they don't include, like interest rates. Interest rates went from 2.4% to 10%, and you can't get the money. People can't buy houses. They no longer have the American dream. Young people, young black people.
The reason the interest rates went that high is they're trying to drive the high housing market up, and they can't down, but they can't do it. And so, because people aren't selling their properties, people have a second house, third house, people aren't selling their properties because they don't believe in the dollar anymore. They don't want to, they believe in land, right? Land is always going to have value as opposed to money, cash, you know, currency. And people who have investment properties, have commodities, have gold, have, you know, investment in, you know, whatever, farmlands and things like this. Like, that's real. Like, people have real stuff and they're holding on to real things because they believe the inflation is worse, because it is, right? Inflation is, they're driving up, trying to drive down home prices, and they can't do it. Like, even with these high interest rates, that's why they raise the interest rate. And so that means that inflation is worse than they're saying, because they're artificially keeping the price of gold down, they're keeping the price of real estate down, right, and commodities.
They don't have the American dream anymore. They can't buy a house. They can't borrow the money.
And this isn't just Joe Biden. Trump did this too. Trump did the bailouts. Trump closed the economy down. Like, Trump got played, right? He got worked.
Because of the cost of the money. They can't buy it because of the cost of housing, because of the cost to build it, because of inflation. Inflation is a disaster, and it's destroying our country, and it's destroying the black community probably as much or more.
So what do you do?
Than any.
What's your plan?
You know what we have to do? We have to bring down the cost of energy, and that's going to bring down the cost of inflation. This was all started with a bad energy policy by Joe Biden. By the way, just if I might, I was running against a man named Biden. You probably saw that. And he was losing very badly in the polls. And then he had a rather bad debate. I would say it was a bad debate. I would say it was one of the worst debates in history. And his poll numbers crashed. And instead of saying, you know, let's keep going and maybe something happens the other way, they said, oh, we're going to replace him. Let's just replace him. That's like you're in a fight. A prize fighter's in a fight. He's not doing well. You say, let's bring in another fighter. So our whole campaign was steered toward him, and now we have to steer toward him. But ultimately, it's the same, because they have bad policy. They have policies of open borders, unbelievable open borders, horrible energy policies. They want to get rid of, as you say, gasoline in cars. They want to get rid of oil. They want to get rid of efficient heating.
Mr. President.
Environmentally, what they're doing is killing our...
He did a dismissive point at that woman here.
Environmentally, what they're doing is killing our country. They're
I ended up jumping forward here. It was very entertaining. And then my wife and I listened to the whole thing in the car. We went to the chiropractor, which was, my wife had scheduled that right before I got my back hurt. He really didn't help, but my back's better now. You know, it's like 80% better or something. But anyways, I went back and I found these two parts, but I skipped all the parts that weren't the one woman interacting with them and there were a couple. There's a lot of funny stuff here. I'm not going to show you everything because it's long, but here are some great moments.
He's a United States Senator. So he's a United States Senator. And so, Harris, like I respect you for your success, I respect people for their success.
The reason I asked the question is because the last time you and I sat and talked was the day that you were shot. We'd been together for much of that day. You left to go to Butler, Pennsylvania, and we didn't know what was next.
Yeah.
And 2 days after that...
I cannot understand. Your microphone
I know,
is so
it is
muffled.
really hard for me to
it's
understand
just,
you too.
I can understand you perfectly.
Because she's closer.
I can understand you.
That's classic Trump, right? But here's a ketchup gate intersection. So Trump is like pointing out that this woman, he keeps on blaming her for the mics, and she obviously isn't the technician. But they had problems setting up the mics, and him was going at this woman who asked him what he considered nasty questions. But it's part of her belief system as a reporter, a mainstream reporter, right? Of course she was going to ask those questions. He likes the middle woman too, because he says she's not as nasty. But here.
But I can't understand, Harris.
I have a few more questions.
Because of the distance, and the mics are really in lousy shape, but I cannot understand what you're saying.
So what I wanted to say was the last time we spoke, you said some words that were prophetic because I asked you who you wanted to choose for vice president.
Yeah.
And you said normally it really wouldn't matter what they would bring. You choose somebody that you think has a future, that sort of thing. But you said these words 3.5 hours before an attempted assassination on your life. You told me that bad things happen, Harris, and that's why this decision is important this time. Bad things happen. You said it twice.
See, Trump can't help himself. Like, he knew there was going to fake some shit, right? He knew there's a fake, the Band-Aid gate and ketchup gate was coming up. And he can't help himself. And he said this to her, and she's making it sound like he was being prophetic, but he just brags, and like, Trump is the worst. He can't keep secrets. They shouldn't give this guy classified information. He just can't do it. And so he was, he did what he did there.
A cognitive test. Now, I'd do it with her too. I would do it with her also. You know what? She failed her law exam. She didn't pass her law exam, so maybe she wouldn't pass the cognitive test.
Mr. President,
are you saying she wouldn't pass? Just to be clear,
I'm just giving you the facts.
To be clear, you don't think Harris?
How do you intend?
She didn't pass her bar exam, and she didn't think she would pass it, and she didn't think she was going to ever pass it. And I don't know what happened. Maybe she passed it.
She did pass it.
There's a man over here. I think he must work.
So then, towards the end here, wraps up with this stuff here. So Trump's triggered at the woman in the blue here.
Limited time, sir. I'd love to move on to different topics.
Excuse you. You're the one that held me up for 35 minutes, just so you understand.
If we can move on now to the state
This is great.
of the race, sir. I want to get back to the campaign.
I mean, it's a horrible decision for him to come out here because of all the things I've said. It's great for me though.
Senator J.D. Vance is your
and all of us, because it's funny. So then a funny thing happens here.
J.D. Vance?
I'm going to get my J.D. Vance question in. To your point and to Rachel's point, he, has a lot of opinions about childless women like myself or divorced people like yourself. Do you think, I mean, my point is here.
I'm actually glad he went to this thing. I mean, personally, it's a disaster for him. But again, this is hilarious. This is great. She's asking good questions here.
Will still be president at 82, which is older than Biden is right now.
But not mentally. Look, mentally.
Here's the question.
He's shot. But most people.
Would you consider?
Most people. I know many people in their 80s and their 90s that are in great shape. Some of our greatest leaders. You look at throughout the world history. The greatest leaders, some of the greatest leaders in the world were in their 80s.
But here's the question. Would you consider stepping down if you felt that your health was declining? Or would you?
Oh, absolutely.
And who would
I think I'd know.
How would you make that decision?
I think I'd know. Look, if I came onto a stage like this and I got treated so rudely as this woman treated me.
Oh, my goodness.
Fish boy,
And I'm fine with it because she was very rude, sir. Very rude. That was a nasty, that wasn't a question. She
Sir,
didn't
you
ask
can
me a
answer the question.
She gave a statement. That wasn't a question.
I repeated your
answer the
statement, sir,
question.
actually.
You said you would. You would
Oh,
make that
absolutely.
decision
If I
yourself.
It's like she's got to keep Trump on track here.
that I was failing in some way, I want people to be sharp. I'll go a step further. I want anybody running for president to take an aptitude test, to take a cognitive test. I think it's a great idea. And I took 2 of them and I aced them.
Well,
I took 2 of them.
Not the good ones. They're not the hard ones.
But let me ask
And he would pass probably the hard ones, but like the ones that screen for dementia and Parkinson's, he might not pass in a year or 2. I mean, I don't know about Parkinson's, but dementia.
more openly than I saw on January 6th. What's going to happen to those people? What's going to happen to the people in Portland that destroyed that city?
But sir, my question is on those.
What's going to happen to the people that tried to
rioters who assaulted
Excuse me.
officers.
You have to
Would
ask,
you pardon
what's
those
going to
people?
happen? Oh, absolutely, I would.
You
If
would
they're
pardon
innocent,
those?
If they're innocent, I would pardon them.
They've been convicted.
And by the way, the Supreme Court just after the J6 people with a vengeance.
J6.
I'll tell you what.
She didn't go after him. Who's you? Look at this is a sad fish boy here.
What about the cops that were, and I'm all for the police, as you know, but what about the police that are ushering everybody into the Capitol? Go in, go in, go in. What about that? Look, nothing is perfect in life, but you have people from Minneapolis.
Anyway, so kind of a disaster. The sound bites were early on. Trump, like just not letting it go. Bad move on his part. Kamala's out, which we said, trying to win the black vote, which makes it seem like she has no chance of winning, which I'm not saying is I think Trump winning is going to be more of a disaster for all the reasons I've said before, that the truth community and the Trumpers will relax and they'll just push through so much stuff, and Trump will probably push it through just like he did with the Operation Warp Speed, because the Trumpers are delusional. There's no winning here. It's, we're heading towards the end. Like both these things indicate we're heading towards the end. So I guess this guy is Dr. Jack Cruz. I mentioned him at the beginning of the video. I watched this clip and, I had turned everything on my computers and stuff to get rid of the blue light, and I had blue light glasses and things. But I, made an effort to do that. I found a way to do it on my TV. They didn't have a setting for that. But really important. This guy makes some points here that I think are valid. And there's a little bit of after that, there's going to be a Corey Feldman.
Your computer screens are blue lit. The reason none of them are red lit, the reason none of them pay attention to circadian biology is because that original technology was developed in a government program that Bobby Kennedy knows about, and I happen to know about because I went to medical school at LSU. For those of you who've never heard about Operation Paperclip, you think it's all conspiracy theory. So at Tulane Neurology and Tulane Neurosurgery in the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s, the CIA started a program there where they would do all these crazy things to monkeys. And the CIA wanted to see how they could control things utilizing different things like drugs and things like that. Where the neurosurgeons got involved, which is my clade, we would drill the tops of the heads off, put wires into the thalamus, put electricity in there, and kind of see what kind of behavioral changes we could have. One of the guys that was in that program was a guy named Professor Delgado. He got the idea to take it in a bigger animal. When he saw that we could control the behavior with the wired device, he said, what if we do it wirelessly? So he checked it in monkeys and checked it in bulls, and it turned out you can do it wirelessly with RFID chips and semiconductors. And the CIA took it to the next level. They said, well, since this is electromagnetic radiation and they begin done wirelessly, what if we did it through light through screens? And it turns out you can. And that's the reason why all your computer screens have the frequencies they have. So why is this all important?
Okay, so after seeing that, I'm pretty sure Corey Feldman doesn't know how to play guitar at all. He knows how to make noise at faces. Corey J. Feldman. Someone else sent me something. I didn't get a chance to see it yet on another Corey Feldman. So there's some renaissance of Corey J. Feldman here. All right, so I'm going to wrap this video up. I don't think there's much more to say. This video is going to be close to 4 hours. Probably going to put this up for like 2.5 days before I release another video. It just went this way, and I'll talk about that. I'm going to get a quick introduction to the video. So that's it for this one. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting to the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.